have Samuel from Illinois, who wants to make a philosophical and scientific argument for God. Samuel, are you there?
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I do. I'm sorry.
Good. You want to make a philosophical and scientific argument for God?
Yes, I do, actually. I'm much of my training in school for undergrad physics. I had like a lot of interest in cosmology, and so I do also dabble in philosophy as well.
Okay, that's cool. Let's do it. This should be
Fire
interesting.
away.
Yes, I'd like to start with the philosophy. You've heard of Plato's school of the realm of forms, or
Yes.
Platonism?
Yes. Would you like to explain it to the audience, just in case they haven't, or would you like me to explain it to the audience? It might be better coming from your own words.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a professional on it, but I would say the gist is that essentially much of our concept of ideas and our concept, literally the concepts of things, inhabit a realm or dimension separate from the physical reality, and that us thinking about it is how we tap into things like mathematics, geometry, and language, that these things are independent from the physical world, and that Plato back then was trying to describe, I think, what he called the realm of the pleroma, which is where we essentially draw from these ideas.
Yeah, so just to kind of clarify that, for people who want the kind of gist of it, the main gist of it, Plato said there was a realm of perfect forms. So every time we, for example, think of a circle, it is an imperfect representation of a circle. The only true perfect circle exists in this realm of perfect forms. Have I got that about right to your understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, let's discuss it. Go ahead.
And so from that starting point, I think geometry is my base foundation. The fact that we can come up with geometry, and that despite there no concept of a triangle existing, and yet most of our ideas around photography, basic engineering, architecture is built on ideas that don't actually physically exist, is what really started to open me up to the idea of God. Because to me, whether it be a concept like love or compassion, there might not be a physical explanation as to why those things exist, but at the same time, I would consider those to be emergent properties that we are drawing from in that essential Platonist point of view, that despite there not being a physical explanation for love, love exists in a different realm that we interact with. And I think that aspect is one of the characteristics of a God.
Why do you think that? And, why do you think that's the case? And we have, because you've let me just clarify why I'm asking that here, because you've asked two, essentially for me, you've put two different points forward there. The first one is that things like love have no explanation. They're not physical things and they have no explanation, therefore God. And you also said geometry. And this falls into different categories for me, because the way I would explain it is, first of all, love does have an explanation. In fact, loves, the many different forms of love that we know of, have explanations. We know they come from the brain. We know they're emotional things. Friend of the show, Dr. Richard Firth Godby here, who wrote A Human History of Emotion, a very good friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years plus. He's written a book all about the history of emotion, where he talks about these different kinds of love. Neuroscientist Dr. Dean Burnett wrote a book called Emotional Ignorance, where he specifically talks about love and how it comes from the physiology, the brain, the nervous system, and the different kinds of love. So on that point, you've completely lost me, saying that it's not a physical thing. On the geometry part of it, where I think is you're going back to this realm of perfect forms from Plato, I think there are arguments against that And I think, I think one of the stronger ones was put forward by Bertrand Russell, I think it was. And we can go into that shortly. But I'm really interested in why you think they are evidences or proofs for God in themselves, when one seems to have an explanation anyway. From the experts in the fields who talk about that certainly believe it has a physical explanation, and the other one has is certainly philosophical considerations which we need to take into account. So why do you think that the realm of forms proves God? Things like geometry come from the realm of forms, and the arguments, specifically the arguments against those, aren't strong.
Yeah, and I should apologize for the love, because I'm a huge advocate for natural selection. So I could say that there are multiple physical explanations as to why organisms would have compassion or want to experience, social relationship with each other. I only offered that big one because at times I would say in a zero-sum universe, there might be pressures as to why we would pursue love as a broad concept as opposed to just self-interest. Even then, Richard Dawkins does talk about why you could be compassionate. I would say the geometry angle is compelling to me because I would say it's an example of an emergent property that has no physical reality, and yet the truth of it is so powerful that it does, in fact, influence the physical reality, if that makes sense. Like I said, there is no true triangle.
Argue with you a tiny bit, Samuel. Sorry, just because I think the way that I'm not an expert in mathematics, so forgive me. I read a lot and then I forget half of what I read, so I reread a lot. But I reread a lot on mathematics and the mathematics of the universe, and I've watched a lot of interesting documentaries on people who think that maths is related to mathliness is next to godliness, or however you might describe it. But my understanding of mathematics is descriptive of the universe. It's not as some separate separate property that doesn't have a physical manifestation, but rather it's a language that describes the physical world around us. So I feel like we're disconnected on that.
Well, and that's a school of philosophy. Is it a discovery or is it something that we invent? And my point of view is that I think it's a false distinction, that ultimately it's both something that we discover and something that is innate, because or something that we contribute. Because I think, and that ties into the land of forms, is that I think people are essentially a window into that, essentially, which is why art is like so powerful to us. When people make a beautiful artwork, I think they're tapping into something greater than themselves, but they also
why do you
are
think
the window to that.
Why is it, Samuel, because that you think that? It's a nice thing to think. I just don't understand why.
Well, I would think that because essentially when they're doing something like a sense of awe or appealing to something more, and I don't want to use the word divine, but something greater than themselves, I think that is, I think it is emotionally appealing, but I think it's also like a sign of something deeper innate to like consciousness itself. Because essentially, I don't know why people are oriented towards more radical concepts like both beauty and disorder, but I think that would help explain why. Because I think in their forms, separate from the physical laws and everything, things like order and chaos are just, absolute, and that we can choose between the two. But to have like there could be a physical explanation as to why we like music, and in the future that could be given. But as of right now,
we know lots of reasons why we like music, to do with the brain and the natural rhythm of the human body and things like that. There are lots of reasons. I feel like if this isn't, because I think you've got a really interesting approach and you're very nice about it. I think, Samuel, this might be a bit of a God of the gaps, just put in an interesting philosophical way.
Oh, no, and absolutely. But my appeal would be that it's not necessarily God of the gaps. I think that God and science are one of the same, that the physical constants and such, though, are manifestations of something intertwining with us, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is
goes into
something
my
that
scientific-
Yeah, sure. I'll just
I'm
say
sorry.
that this is something that a conversation that I have with a lot of people, and something that I preface whenever I talk about religion. Well, most of the time when I talk about religion, because it comes up a lot. The concept of like whether via mathematics or cosmology or something of like the something greater being explained as God is really just a personal descriptor. It's just a distinction that I personally prefer, and I'm fine with you to feel that way. I'm fine with you to call that unknown God. For me, it's just a scientific unknown. What's the purpose of this idea? What does this do for us?
Well, and here's the thing, and here's the contradiction. Well, I wouldn't say it's a contradiction, but I would say that God wants us to be in a situation where we don't necessarily have to depend on him, but that we do appeal to higher truths as a way for us to self-orient ourselves, whether it be like through compassion for others, through empathy. Because when other religions say that you have to believe, it's almost used as a threat rather as a tool for us to come together. But
Is it? I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, Samuel, but my degree is in religious studies. I've studied lots of religions. I've been very fortunate, I consider myself, to have been a guest at Buddhist temples and mosques and lots of different churches. And I've never heard anybody really kind of outright threaten people that you've kind of got to follow them in a threatening manner. There's the kind of background, like underhanded, well, you might burn in hell forever if you don't kind of threat. But surely that's in Christianity as well. I've heard, I'm sure Emma has heard as well. Many Christians make that remark. Well, you'll burn for hell. You'll burn in ever for hell. That kind of threatening, and that's from Christians. I don't really hear anything. I hear that in some other religions, but I don't hear anything beyond that in other religions. I've certainly never been at a mosque, and I've never gone in pretending to be a Muslim, and I've never been in a mosque and somebody walk up to me with a gun and say, "You will convert or else." It's never happened. It's never happened. So I think you may be watching too much TV.
Historically, don't you think that's a bit disingenuous, though, that there has been instances of Muslim clerics and preachers of the past using...
Yeah, I think probably every religion has done it in the past, but from my personal experience interacting with these people, it's not something that happens every day. Do you not think it's happened in Christianity in the past, where people have been threatened that if you don't turn into Christian...
I'm not saying it's innate to any religion. I'm saying oftentimes... The reason why religion is so compelling is both the institution and the implicit threat of denying anyone religion. Like, if you deny Christianity, you will go to hell. If you deny the Prophet Muhammad, you will be put to the stake. I'm saying that oftentimes religion does use implicit threats as a way to galvanize, loyalty to that religion.
That's a fair enough statement, Samuel. I'd just like to point out that's a fair enough take, but you did say that Christianity doesn't do this and other religions do, and that was the point I was making. That not all other religions do it. Like, it's just not a given in other religions that it happens. And when we look back historically, Christians also do it as well. So it's not particularly a good argument when you're trying to say, well, Christianity doesn't do this, other people do, because it's a bit nonsensical, really, isn't it?
But I'm not claiming Christianity is better for that reason at all.
Okay. That's certainly how it sounded. Anyway, let's move on.
Sorry. I think Samuel and Richard, you guys are just getting a bit crossed wires on that. I really would like to hear the scientific aspect of your offerings, please, Samuel.
Yes. So essentially has to do with cosmology and the nature of time, because a lot of my... Well, I shouldn't say a lot. Some of my studies in school was related to cosmology and Big Bang Theory. And essentially, you've heard of like the concept that, time is an emergent property.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, it's a part, relativity, but essentially that mass and energy, when combined, are what allow for time to exist because it's an aspect of space-time itself. It's kind of relating from Richard Penrose's idea of, I think it's his idea of a cyclical universe. And it's a relationship. It has its relationship with shapes, in that, and maybe I'm butchering this a lot, is that over a given enough time, especially as matter and energy dissipate over trillions and trillions of years, that they will essentially be a time where, because there's no reference point for how time should function, essentially there is no end point to time, and so infinity becomes, literally physically manifest, and that. In relation to things like quantum fluctuations, you can get something like a Big Bang again. That's very reductive for what could be a much more in-depth explanation. But how I relate to that is that I believe that, have you heard of the concept of a Boltzmann brain?
I
Yes.
haven't.
Would you like to explain it for the audience and for people who haven't?
Me.
Yes, a very tough. Yeah, a top-down explanation is that essentially quantum fluctuations, or just things like quantum fluctuations could recreate what could be considered a human brain, whether it be physical or just the electrical wiring of a physical brain, and that. However unlikely it is, because time is infinite, supposedly, which it has yet to be proven. Given enough time, you could essentially recreate the perfect replication of a human brain, even without a body, essentially.
Forgive me, Samuel, but weren't you talking about the scientific proof for God here? And as much as, Boltzmann's brains, and we can get onto the philosophy in a second, but Emma asked you specifically about the science, and when you jump in to the speculative, then we're not really talking about the science anymore.
Or evidence.
Oh, yeah, or indeed evidence. You started talking about infinity and cyclical universes, and that confused me a little bit, because the prevailing theory in cosmology is the heat death of the universe. That, things are going to stretch out so much that the heat will essentially, it's why it's called the heat death. The universe started being infinitely hot from the that word that I can't remember, that little dot point thing, singularity is the one. I'm doing that a lot today, I don't know why. The singularity from which universe came was infinitely hot and dense. It's cooled down, and it will cool down to such a rate that all the heat will be dissipated, the universe will stretch out that far, and that's why it's called the heat death. That's the prevailing theory in cosmology. So it's interesting to me that you're talking about scientific evidence. You're trying to present this as scientific evidence, but you're talking about a hypothesis which isn't the kind of mainstream accepted one by the majority of physicists. So what is it about the cyclical universe? Sorry, carry on, please.
Oh, yeah. I would say this is an argument the same way, prosecution would make an argument. I can't tell you with any certainty what I'm saying is the truth. I was raised in a Christian household, but I was very, very skeptical of any type of claim for God. It's only until recently that I would say that I'm warmed up for more both a philosophical and scientific explanation for God, but I can't say with any certainty that God is real. I'm just saying that this is a compelling argument for me as to why I think it could be plausible that he exists. But,
that's okay, Samuel. I just want to interrupt you again, just to clarify. Can we agree then? Because I just want us to be on the same page. Can we agree that regarding the point you made about love, that isn't evidence for God, because you've agreed with us? It does come from the physical, and this idea that the cyclical universe and Boltzmann's brains, these aren't actually, because Emma specifically asked you for the scientific evidence, these aren't in fact scientific evidence. These are things that you are convinced of, but the scientific evidence doesn't actually state that these things are true. It doesn't evidence them. Can we agree on those things? And then let's move on into the things that we can that talk about that may be compelling to us.
Oh no, there are definitely hypotheses, but I would say, for one, if we can get into it, I mean, the reason why I find those so compelling is the fact that it's not just the God of the gases, that many of the interpretations relying on those things fit into like actual cosmology. The fact that, because for example, for the Big Bang, there is no starting. Each point of the universe has experienced the Big Bang. It's just the fact that there is no, how should I put it? There's no time before the Big Bang. Essentially, that all times, all clocks start there. And for me, I feel like that is proof that in the idea of simultaneity, if you know that, is both it's proven, and that's inherent to relativity. And for me, that's proof that time as a concept isn't as strict as what many lay people might assume to be about the universe. That's
I'm just not
proven
sure,
to me.
Samuel, if I understand how your thoughts on the nature of time and cosmology relate to God. I mean, if we were going to have a properly link these ideas that you're talking about with God, we'd have to ask you to define what you're talking about when you say God anyway. Are you talking about a creator being, something that originated the universe? Are you talking about something that is somehow responsible for interacting with the nature of space-time? Or so I just wonder if there's a way you can succinctly sort of explain for us, so that we can have this conversation, what is the link between these cosmological and philosophical discussions and you thinking that is related to God, or some kind of argument for God? Because I'm a bit lost, to be honest.
Okay, then let me give a broad, and obviously, like I said, much of it is hypothesis, so you can feel free to say that the science isn't certain, and I would agree. So my view is that because time is infinite, quantum fluctuations will eventually produce something like a Boltzmann brain, and in my opinion, I would call that something like a God, if not God, and that I think
the brain you would call God, or the you would call that brain-like creation God, or you would call the events that facilitated that God? What is it you're calling God?
Well, I think God is the totality of the system, but I would think the brain is in that situation would be the entire system, because in that environment, especially once the heat death approaches, the heat death, I think, can never be completed, because there's no way for all energy to ever dissipate. Space-time itself has inherent energy, which is why quantum fluctuations, which is scientific, has been proven without a shadow of a doubt that over time, if it's possible for something to arise like a Boltzmann brain, it will inevitably arise. And because of that, I think our universe is something of a product of a previous Boltzmann brain, which I would call God.
That's first of all, it's a bit of a tautology to say that it's possible for something to arise, therefore it will arise. That's given. The thing I think I'm having trouble with is connecting the dots. In fact, a couple of things on this point. First of all, connecting the dots that it is possible to begin with. I don't think you've demonstrated that. And secondly, you jump in from this idea of a Boltzmann brain, which in the original formulation was the idea that a brain was created including memories, and this is how minds can form. It doesn't necessarily, even if a Boltzmann brain formed, it doesn't necessarily lend itself that it is a God, never mind a specific God. So it seems like there's a lot of dots you need to connect, which you're not currently connecting. I'm certainly having trouble with that. I think Emma's having a bit of trouble with that as well. All we're asking you to do is connect the dots for us. Walk us through the process of this is, I think a Boltzmann brain might be possible. I think it's possible because step A, B, and C. And I think that a Boltzmann brain is God. Walk us through the steps A, B, and C, and that God is a specific God. Walk us through the steps A, B, and C. Because all you're doing at the moment is saying, well, I think a Boltzmann brain can be created, and then I think that's God, and that created the universe. And you're not really showing us any of the working out. You're just telling us what you believe, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, to listen. But we want to know why you believe it. We want to work through that with you, rather than just having you tell us, because that's a bit boring. If I'm honest, from my point of view, I want to know why people are talking about it.
Yes, I mean, so I would say from the beginning, then, for quantum fluctuations, is that essentially, I don't want to give too much of a lay view, but the fact that literally at the fundamental reality, things pop in and out of existence. Would you agree that happens?
Yeah, I think that happens. Yeah, I think that's what the physics shows. I don't know about him. I don't know how much I've.
I think the most accurate way that I've read my favorite physicist describe it is that that's what appears to be the case. From what we can see, I don't think it's totally accurate to say that is what happens. That's certainly an approximation from our view. But yes, but I'm happy to go with that.
Yeah, fair point, fair clarification.
Yes, and through that, would you say that random fluctuation, if in an environment like the one described by the Big Bang, that a random fluctuation could have caused the Big Bang?
Now, this is where I'm getting confused, because you're saying in an environment like the Big Bang and could have caused the Big Bang. So you seem to be kind of like jumping backwards and forward time-wise here. What we know about the Big Bang, this precedes the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the process where we have this change of state. This is the name we give to it. I know you know this, Samuel. I'm not explaining this to the audience. So the Big Bang is this change of state we have from where we have this infinitely hot and dense point, which is a singularity, Richard. Which a name I couldn't remember earlier. And this hot and dense point, for some reason, we don't know why, began to start cooling and expanding. In that cooling process, it began to expand, and that's how all the particles and everything formed. And it is this expansion process, this point where it cools and expands. We kind of put a demarcation line there, and we say this is called the Big Bang. This is time zero. This is where everything began. But before that, we don't actually know how the singularity came to be. And there are, as you say correctly, lots of theories about it. Some people connect these theories of things jumping up, appearing out of, and I'm going to be very careful here when I say this, nothing is not actually a nothing. It's a physical, it's a state of where particles jump out of like a kind of weird particle gravy, which doesn't exist but does exist at the same time. Physics is great, isn't it? And we have this, and these particles jump out of this. That's one of the ideas about how the singularity started was that it was one of these particles that popped out of this weird gravy stew and suddenly formed our universe. And there might be, there are lots of hypotheses that say there might be many, many, many of these that happen all the time, that they might even happen within our own universe all the time and form new universes. And it's all lots of fun, but it is a hypothesis. We don't know that's how the universe started. Certain physicists, I think Lauren Krauss ascribes to this idea that, that's how the universe came about. And I think it's interesting, and these hypotheses are interesting, but it's even more interesting to me when you're ascribing, look, I believe in a God, and I believe in a God because of this, when it is a hypothesis and we don't actually know the answer. And this is why it's so important for me to ask you, how are you doing the work? Because you're describing one of many, many hypotheses. But yet again, if you forgive me, Samuel, you're not actually showing us you're working out. You're not saying, this is my preferred hypothesis because, and here is my reasoning. You're saying to us, this is my preferred hypothesis. And if you follow it down this line of lots of preferred hypothesi I have, then it is you get to God. But you're not showing us, she's still not showing us the working, and that's the really, really important part for us. And that's what we're just missing out from you, Samuel. So if I can really try and get you to zone in on giving us the working out, rather than just saying that, you know, like, this hypothesis makes sense to me, this hypothesis is attractive to me. Can you kind of tell us why you think that hypothesis is the case, why it is your preferred hypothesis over the many, many others that are out there?
Yes, because I think over the span of what I think is infinity, because I do think infinity as a concept exists. I think mathematics deals with infinity all the time, and whether or not you think mathematics is real or to describe something, I do think things like calculus and even geometry, both. I'm humbled to say whether or not it proves, but it does. The fact that it often needs infinities in equations tells me that the concept of infinity does exist. And with that in mind, if that applies to something like time, whether or not I can say with certainty that it will eventually create something that I would call a god, that over time something like the Boltzmann braid would arouse, and because of that thing would become. I'm sorry, arise.
Sorry. No, sorry. It was too easy a target to let go unchallenged. Please continue, Samuel. Sorry, just ignore me.
I think he wants to experience love, so yeah, I think arouse is valid. But
comes full circle.
Boltzmann, it intersects with the philosophy that I think once that entity is created, the Boltzmann braid, it wants to simulate it's a self-existence essentially, and be able to feel what it's like to be a conscious agent. And in an environment like that, I think something like an ancestor simulation would help explain why something like the universe would come about. Essentially, it would create its own universe to be able to experience itself.
I'm going to pass you to Emma shortly to respond to you, Samuel. I'm just going to say before I do that, thank you for acknowledging that infinity is a thing. It's very nice to hear a theist say that, because so many pretend that it's not. And if you would like to debate William Lane Craig and correct his silly, foolish ass on this notion, please feel free to arrange one, and I will be watching it and in your corner all the way. But with that, I'm going to pass you over to Emma so she can respond to what you've said so far, and then we'll let you continue.
I'm happy with everything that you've said so far, Samuel. I'm still as like Richard, I'm still hung up on the why. You've said you think that this is a good. I just need to know why you think that a Boltzmann brain, is it? I'm not familiar with the concept, so if I'm misunderstanding it completely, you have to talk to me like I'm 5. I'm sorry. Why you think that relates to a creator in the sense that it would want to create, how what this theoretical simulated brain would want, and how that relates to there being a god. Because I feel like I could be on board with all these hypotheses, and maybe I would read a lot and these would be my favorite, and I still wouldn't have any faith in a god. So I'm just still getting a bit lost on kind of the basics, I think. That might be me just not understanding fully.
No. And also for your William Craig debate, if this is anything to go by, I would have to practice a lot not to be.
I don't think you would. But, I think you'd be all right, mate, to be honest, because he's a bit shit. He's not as good as everybody makes out.
But I would say I'm very much butchering, I think, the philosophy of a short story. Have you heard of The Egg?
I mean, that's a little bit vague. I've heard of eggs.
An egg.
Well, for the listeners hearing this, I would very much recommend reading it. I think it's a very beautiful short story about why God would make reality. And it's essentially the idea that he wants to replicate himself, create another entity similar to him, which is why I think something like the Garden of Eden is allegorical. I don't know if I'm breaking with, major Christian doctrine, but I think the idea that it was a mistake for us to eat the tree is apologies for my language, utter bullcrap. I think he wants us to experience the very nature of being alive, which includes both love and pain. And the idea that things like us learning to become more compassionate with one another despite our animalistic tendencies is the entire point. Our ability to overcome hardship is why we have to be in a universe filled with death and pain. I don't know why people make so much fuss about sin. I think sin, it's what we needed to hear at the time of the message, because a lot of people, I think, are really much oriented towards an authoritative figure telling them what they have to do rather than given them a good explanation as to why they should do it innately. But to me, the reason why the Boltzmann brain is appealing is that the fact that within the short story, essentially, it's about him wanting to come closer to his creation by making us go through a very active existence, which includes all of the human emotions, all of our struggles, all of our pain, so that we can come closer to him eventually.
Doesn't this kind of
the main purpose?
I feel like, Samuel, I know you said that you've you sort of did a lot of reading and philosophizing that brought you to more of a theistic perspective, but I do wonder if you have to start here with a presupposition that God exists and that you have an idea of what he wants. And because for me as a person who has no relationship with the God concept, there's nothing to link this nice story or what sounds like, sure, if I was going to be a Christian, I'd probably be on board with your philosophy. I like the sound of it, but because I like the sound of it doesn't mean that I think it's true. So I'm just losing where it's just because we sort of were drawn in because there was an idea of like evidence, and just an idea of like, this is why I'm compelled to believe in God, but it feels like you have to believe in God at the start for your ideas to make sense. Did that make any sense?
No, absolutely. And for full clarity, I would say I did have, a supernatural visitation, but my thing is I don't believe anyone should believe my anecdote. I think anecdotes are terrible evidence. So if I would say that I had something like that, I don't expect either of you to believe that. I would say this is somewhat of a post hoc rationalization as to why that experience was as powerful as it was. Mm-hmm. But to me, I think a big view on my idea of God is that fact that it's not coercive. Essentially, that you don't have to necessarily believe God is there. Because my thing is, I think it's like an experiment almost. The laboratory doesn't want to tamper with the results too much. Otherwise, what's the point of running the experiment for me? Like, I don't want to taint my results. Otherwise, the entire point is fruitless. So I think for me, my idea of God is something that is passive in the way he interacts with the world. I think he wants us to. I'm sorry.
Sorry, you can finish. You can finish your point, Samuel. You go ahead.
Yes, like the passivity of him essentially giving out edicts is something that human religions falter with, because I think all human religions are somewhat true. It's just the fact that because people value tribal instincts over a lot of things, they hyper focus on certain bits of truth and then they put human, faults within them. Like, for example, I think a lot of the 10 Commandments are true, but some of them I don't think are true. I think some of them are just what humans at the time put in order to make sure that they can maintain power. I think that
I am gonna cut in because I feel like we're gonna go off on big old tangents, and I think we've kind of got to the crux of it, which I did a video a little while ago. I don't know if anybody watching saw it, but it was 10 reasons I'm not a Christian in response to the question, why aren't you a Christian? And one of my given reasons is that most of the time when I talk to somebody who has evidence and compelling reasoning, it turns out after a long-winded discussion, no offense, Samuel, I do think it's been very interesting and you've been very nice with interesting ideas, but it tends to boil down to I had a religious experience, or I was brought up Christian, or, something that is anecdotal. And like you said accurately, we can all agree, isn't evidence, it's not going to change my mind or Richard's mind, and I don't think there's anywhere really else we can move with this. You've got some interesting ideas. To you, they say God is real. To me, they have nothing to do with God, and the conversation, I think, just is going to be cyclical after this point, because I don't think we can relate to each other.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I wasted your time. I just wanted to give
You've not wasted our time at all.
Not at all.
No, you've not wasted our time at all. And Samuel, you've been greatly respectful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having the conversation with you. I do want you to call back, and believe it or not, I actually want to discuss the religious experience. There's this kind of experience you had, because I want you to walk through the actual experience and what is compelling about it for you, and see if we can work together to try and untangle that web and see why it's not compelling for us, why it's compelling for you. See if we can reach some kind of ground where we can agree on it. In the meantime, I'm going to do a secular rarity and give you some homework. I don't usually do this for people, but I have thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with you. And we didn't quite get to everything I would have liked to have got to in the time we've had. I want you to kind of, if you haven't already, I want you to go away and read up on Bertrand Russell's kind of objections to the perfect Platonic realm, because it has some really, really good objections to it. And if you haven't read them already, please go and read them. Him and other philosophers. There are some quite major flaws with it, so it'd be good for you. I keep glancing up because I keep forgetting his name, and I've got his History of Western Philosophy sat on my bookshelf just up to my left, so I keep up just to remind me of what he's called. But if you read up on some of Bertrand Russell and other people's objections to the perfect Platonic realm, because some of them are quite compelling, if you can give us a call next time, please do. I'm going to let you go, but if you can give us a call next time, let's please discuss your experience and walk through it.
Yes, I will do. Thank you so much.
Let's talk with Cliff, him from Ohio.
Evolution versus creation.
Yeah. All right, Cliff. Tell us about your thoughts on evolution versus creation.
Yeah, we can hear you. What would you like to bring up?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I've got some thoughts on it. I had some thoughts. Just willing to talk with you guys for a little bit, and I'll tell you why.
Cool.
I've watched some of your YouTube stuff, and I see where there are some kids on there that are watching you that are going to church, and they're starting to question whether there's a God or not. And I don't have a problem if it's me and you, but I have a problem when you mess with kids. So there you go. I'm just laying that out for you a little bit.
Okay.
But if you would like to discuss a little bit of creation and versus evolution, I can do that. I'm not an apologist or apologetic or whatever they are, but we can start in Genesis 1, and you can go, and then some of that I've listened to. It's about grass couldn't grow without the sun, right? I've heard your comments on that, so we can go through creation.
I mean, so it's kind of what you said you wanted to call in about.
God.
So yeah, can you give us a good summary of? Can you tell us in a bullet point, because it's a call-in show, so we don't have it be conversation. What do you think is the major flaw with the idea of evolution?
What's the major flaw with evolution?
Yeah.
Okay, how did everything start?
You can go there first.
So Cliff,
what evolved into a man? Where did it come from?
Okay.
Yeah. So this is actually a very good question. There are two different fields of science, right? One is abiogenesis, which is the origin of life itself. And then you have evolution, which is once you have these cells, how do they change over time? And the second one, evolution, is something that we clearly see happening right now. You can look at a bacteria and you see mutations, you see it changing, you see it pick up new genetic material, you see things over from one generation to the next, passes on traits, and the traits that are beneficial to survival stay, and the ones that aren't get lost. And there's a lot of complications that go into it, but that's the gist of it. Now, evolution we see in every field of science. This isn't just in the fossil record, although we have that. This isn't just in looking at like the geological time scale. It isn't just with radiometric dating. It isn't just with, paleontology or biology. Like, it's every single field of science. It all fits the data. It all fits. If it's like a Venn diagram where all of the data is like clustered in one place, all of these circles, all of these different fields of science, it all overlaps on evolution. So I think what you're asking is, how do we get life from non-life so that evolution can get started? And for that,
how do we get anything?
Yeah. And
how did anything start? Where was it? What was here?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a really good question. There is actually a lot more science that's been done on this, a lot of experiments that have shown that the building blocks for life do form together naturally. So you do have things like amino acids and nucleic acids and things, carbohydrates and lipids and things that do form on their own. And there's been experiments like the Miller-Urey experiment, and that was back in the 40s. There have been hundreds of experiments since then that have been looking at the different mechanisms whereby this could happen. And we've got a lot of pieces of the puzzle where we can see, oh, hey, here you have these normal forces of nature that are causing these things to form together on their own. Now, you can go further back and further back and further back, and we don't have every piece of the puzzle, and we're not going to pretend like we do. But when you have all of these pieces that all align with this one picture, then you start seeing that. You start seeing how stars form naturally, how all that stars need is gravity, matter, and time, and then they form and they fuse together in these giant fireballs, and eventually there's so much pressure that it ignites. It doesn't need anything more than the basic laws of the universe for stars to start. And then as they burn up their fuel, they collapse in on themselves and explode outward. And all of that matter, all of those basic elements that have been fused together in this high pressure environment have formed more complex atoms. Like, we see these things go from less complex to more complex. And it's something that we can study, that we can know. And when you start to get all of those pieces, when you're really curious about this and you dive deep into it, then this is the direction that it points. Does that kind of answer your question?
Okay, well then how? No, not really. So, okay. What about when the Bible says that everything comes of its own seed? Everything gives after its own kind.
So why do we have to answer the question of how evolution works by looking at what the Bible says? Why are we only bound to that?
Okay, you're not. I'm asking you on my side. Now I'm starting with the Bible. You've been with your scientific. Now how about the Bible?
So,
which
but
to me doesn't contradict science, because here you go. Go ahead.
Well, we don't. You're saying we're talking on your side now. First of all, you can't say that it's our side is science and your side is the Bible and then say they don't contradict. So, like, if they work together, then great. But everything coming from its own seed, nowhere do I think he said anything that says that that's not true. A human does give birth to a human. We're talking about changes over time. So that seems to work out.
Really?
Do you think that's not
Cliff,
the case?
Okay, go ahead.
Cliff, can I explain that? Because I think maybe where the disconnect is happening is, if I have a child, that child is going to be human.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a child, that child is going to be human. No one is expecting you to have a child that has the head of a crocodile and the body of a human. That's not how this works. But if you have a child...
Oh, says who?
Says
all of
the
things we've ever looked at.
the entire scientific community. If you go and take a biology course, this is not how it works. And I think that's where people, a lot of times I've seen creationists paint evolution as that. That is not what anyone is arguing. That is not the argument. That is a straw man position of what we're claiming. What we're saying is, I might give birth to a human, and let's say that Sophia goes off and lives on Mars and joins a new colony, and I stay behind on Earth, and we're separated for 1 million years. Over that period of time, I will continue to have human babies, and they might have a tiny genetic change, and then their children have a tiny genetic change, and and then there might be a pressure where there's massive global warming, and we have to adapt to that. And some of us die out who are less resistant to heat, and some are better able to regulate their temperature. And so there's these little changes that happen, and over time, those changes compile and compile and compile and compile. And if you get to that long end of the line, 1 million years from now, my descendants are going to look very, very different than me now. That doesn't mean that my immediate offspring is going to be radically different, because it happens on very small timescales. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that's assuming that that's all going to work out that way. Yeah.
I mean, I think that
You're
we
saying
assume that
it's all-
because we've
that's
seen that
how
happen
it's gonna
before, because we're able to make predictions when we talk about evolution that do turn out to be true.
But we haven't been here for millions and millions and millions of years.
Oh, do you believe we've been here about 6,000?
That is what evolution says now.
That
Now it's been millions and
may I
millions and
clarify?
millions and millions of years.
Okay. May I clarify? Yeah, that
Go
is
ahead.
indeed what I believe. Are you saying that you think we have not been here for that long? How long do you think we have been here?
I believe what the Bible says. I believe we've only been around for about 6,000 years.
Okay.
Cliff, how do you know that the Bible is true? Because you're taking it on its word, but there are other holy texts from other religions.
You are 100%. I'm taking it on its word.
Okay, so then there's no real point.
I believe the
in
Bible for what it
exploring
says.
anything else, because if you're just saying that I believe these exact words as I understand them, and the Bible does never say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. You're right. There doesn't have to be a contradiction between science and religion, but by saying that it's only 6,000 years old, you're sort of forcing that contradiction. There's a lot of people in the atheist community who are here because we're from backgrounds or families that said the Bible says the Earth is 6,000 years old, and then we learn even a tiny bit about science and are like, wow, most of what I was actively being lied to. So I would say maybe look into that idea a little bit. But if you're coming in to say that you're wanting to, let us talk about, you have this idea that's better than evolution, and it's just because you take the Bible at its word. Do you see how that's not really an argument for those of us who don't take the Bible at its word? That there's no reason for us to believe that it is true. And so you're just saying, I believe in the story because I believe in the story. I don't really know where we're supposed to go with that. Additionally, I think it's kind of a bit ironic that you mentioned children, in the comments, and that we're going after kids, when the arguments that you're making aren't even arguments. And when I was a kid in the Christian church, I would bring up really obvious flaws and like, hey, but why does the Bible have to contradict science? Why can't it be more than 6,000 years old? It really actually looks like it's not a 6,000-year-old Earth. And the Bible never really says that. I would ask those to grownups like you and be like really looking for an answer. And I would just be told, take the Bible at its face. And that's why I'm sitting here today, is because that's not a strong answer. So I'm sort of curious.
It's not.
What are we supposed to do with this if there's just the Bible is the Bible and I believe the Bible and I'm not interested in anything outside of it?
What are you supposed to do with it? Okay, well, you have to take the Bible by faith. And I understand that people want to question that. And I get that. But without faith, it is impossible to please God. And there is a little bit of faith. And the same thing, hold on a minute. I won't take a long time.
Okay.
But even with evolution, you have to have a little bit of faith to believe in evolution, because there is no one person living today that can say, oh yeah, that's exactly how that happened. It started millions of years ago, and this evolved into this, and this evolved into that. There is not one person that can tell you that. It was here to verify that. So you take all that you collect, this information, and say, well, it's got to be this. And here, let me get into this real quick. And I won't be.
I might
long.
pause you there just
You
because
take a trial.
I do think that there was quite a bit of things that you said there that I think would want to respond to real quick.
Yeah, I want to push back first on the notion that you're taking the Bible on faith is equal to taking science on faith. Because if I were to look at the Bible and the biblical text tells me that fish live in trees, would you believe that simply because it's in the Bible? Or would you go out and look at the universe and look at fish and study them and study their attributes and their lives and see if this matches with the Bible? And if it doesn't match with the Bible, what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the Bible? Or are you going to say, look, we were told to take the Bible on faith, but the Bible was wrong. So maybe there's other ways that we can confirm if something's true, because I genuinely believe that truth withstands scrutiny, and we should be able to go out and scrutinize something and see if it's true or not. It's how you can tell that.
Amen. And Jesus is truth. Amen. Preach on.
Okay. So then how, if
I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That is correct.
But
there is truth.
You're spouting this like it's true because it's in the Bible. But how can we test that the Bible's true? How can we know that the Bible is true? Shouldn't we not be afraid to go out and look and see if it contradicts nature?
There you go. Nature itself declares that there is a God.
But it doesn't.
It really doesn't.
But it doesn't.
The Bible says that. It's accurate that the Bible says that.
Does the grass... Okay,
what do you mean, how does it
what
not?
What animal have you ever seen? Yeah, how does nature not declare that there's a God?
Well,
how does it not?
That's strange. Just like asking me how do I not turn orange every day? It's like a completely nonsense question. I don't really know how does it? Maybe let's ask there.
These are inanimate objects that.
Okay. All right. Let's go to how it does. Let's go to how it does. Go back to Genesis. Go back to Genesis.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I feel like
here's another thing I've heard you guys say.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another thing I've heard you guys say with this thing is that, well, how could grass grow without the sun? Because you talk about the days of creation.
I don't think I've ever talked about that.
And I went ahead and Googled it a little bit, and I looked at the Bible, and the sun was created on the third day.
Okay.
I think, was it grass or... No, I'm sorry. Grass was created on the third day. And you guys say, well, how could grass live without the sun?
Yeah.
Well, gee.
Let me pause you right there.
And grass can live for up to a week without
I'm going to pause you or mute you for just 1 second because you're continuing. Okay. So I've muted you for just a second because I was sort of trying to get in. One being, you can find some atheist out there who says that, I'm sure. I'm sure I never have. Thomas, have you ever said, just how can grass grow without the sun? Just throwing that out there.
I don't think I have, and I haven't been on this show in a few years, so I don't think it's talking about me.
So I think that the reason why I'm like, this is kind of a silly question to keep bringing to us because you heard someone say it. It'd be like there are Christians out there who genuinely believe that
the earth is flat.
The earth is flat, sure. Let's say that. I don't think it's fair to hold you to account for something that just some Christian somewhere thinks. Or they really believe that, like, everyone in Africa is the descendant of Cain. Like, that's a real thing some real Christians believe. But it'd be weird for me to ask you to explain that when that's not something that you have said. I think that I'm curious, too. So I'll unmute you, but I really am, Thomas sort of explained our basic theory of evolution and of abiogenesis and how that works. Can you give me anything he said there that you found compelling? Or was there anything that you remember from what Thomas said? Because you're sort of re-asking a question that Thomas already answered. You're unmuted.
Say this again. I'm sorry. Well, hold on. I'm out in the wind here. So,
okay, well,
go ahead and ask me. What are you trying to tell me?
So initially I'm saying I don't think we need to respond to an argument that we personally have never made, because I'm sure there are Christians who believe things that you believe, things that you would think are strange.
I caught that.
Okay, great.
And I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I caught that.
Thank you. So I'm asking, because I feel like Thomas also already dealt with this pretty well in his response about evolution and abiogenesis. Is there anything that you can respond to from there or have further questions on or noted even just from what Thomas said?
I guess not. I guess where I wanted to go with all this was this evolution versus creation thing.
Yeah. And
okay?
I see
if
that.
You go to any, what?
I see that. I think that the difficulty I have is that you asked a question and it was answered. And then I just said, do you have anything that you can respond to it or even remember things he said? And you kind of just said no. So what's the point in a dialogue? Do you see my issue with that?
I can.
Yeah. So I almost want to say, can we go ahead and I have actually enjoyed our conversation. I'm curious if maybe that's something you could watch back and then call in again, because I feel like having a dialogue, like Thomas gave you a really good answer in my opinion. And if you have questions or issues with that, I think that would really be worth exploring. But because it feels like the dialogue fell off with not listening to the answer, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day on that one.
Also, I would want to add though, Cliff, like I do appreciate this call, and I appreciate how patient you've been, in this conversation. Sometimes I've jumped on shows where I've just been cut off and can't talk at all. But Cliff, I've been in your shoes, and I've been in places where I've just taken the Bible 100% at its word because it said so. That's not critical thinking, man. That is not how we can tell. Like, if you were born Hindu, you would believe in the Hindu God. The only way that you can tell if it's true or not is by going out and testing and exploring how does the world actually work with an open mind, looking critically at the evidence. You can go right now online. You don't have to have a paid account. You can just get ChatGPT, pull it up, and type in, give me all of the problems and all of the flaws with Noah's Ark, and just start there and read through them. Click on the links, do some research. Don't just look at answers in Genesis. You can look at their rebuttals, but look at what the scientists are actually saying. And I think that'll give you some idea as to why we personally don't take the Bible at its word, because we started there, but we didn't end there.
Yeah, but thank you very much for calling and for your politeness. And I do really appreciate it. And I hope you call back in again. If this thing will listen to me when I click the button. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I think that, I don't know. What's your take on that after that call? Do you have a basic feeling of?
Yeah, overall, I would say very nice caller.
Yeah.
Seemed like a nice guy. The arguments, besides the one that he wanted us to defend someone else's claim, that I don't personally find the claim of like the order of things that were created in Genesis as very compelling. The only time that I find that argument compelling is with old earth creationists that say, oh, it wasn't actually days, it was millions of years. And then it compounds the problem, because you can't have grass live millions of years without the sun, for example. But I don't find it to be the most compelling argument. To me, I find the most compelling argument the fact that the Bible makes very, very clear claims about the entire earth was covered in water. There's no evidence of that in the geological layers. It talks about the earth being created in 6,000 years. There's no evidence for that. In fact, we have a whole ton of evidence for an old earth. And it's like all of these little things. I think he brought up evolution, but it was a kind of a vague argument, and then it seemed like it started segueing into a bunch of other stuff, and that's when it went a little off the rails.
It feels like it often does, just because it will never be. I remember from back when I was much more fundamentalist, or a fundamentalist at all. I'm no longer a fundamentalist Christian, just clarifying that. I kind of argued the same way. It wasn't just evolution. It was also abiogenesis. It was also the effect of atheism on the world. It was everything was kind of thrown in together. It was sort of the like
spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, or I was going to say like a smoke bomb of distraction, kind of just like haha, and like run away.
It's a gish gallop. It's a gish gallop.
That is an amazing word that I have never heard.
So a gish gallop is when you have a bunch of arguments, and rather than address them one by one, you just throw like 20 arguments at someone. They might all be good arguments, but you won't know because the other person, they're sitting there trying to answer this one, and then it's trying to answer this one. You see William Lane Craig do this a lot in his debates, where he'll throw out 20 different arguments.
Yeah.
A person chooses 3 to respond to. He's like, well, you didn't respond to this one, so you must not have a response to it.
And it's just like you threw every exactly. I love gish gallop. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna try to use that this week. Yeah, I think I do want to really briefly reference also the idea of us like going after kids. And one thing I would say, we're not on children's YouTube. That's just not a thing. If children are coming to this, they're coming to it because they're curious, because they want to watch it. If they're asking questions, it might be because we're the people answering them. I remember truly seeking people older that I thought were older and wiser than me to answer questions about the Bible, because I also believed that if I tested this, it would hold up to scrutiny. So I was not afraid of that. I was going to question everything, keep what is good, like Paul says, right? And it kind of kept being made into a thing where I was I was made to feel bad or ashamed because I was asking questions. And I don't necessarily think that was the intention of older people, but they kind of kept coming back to how I had to have faith, sort of implying that I wasn't if I was asking questions, that I was pushing this too far, and that I was making myself something of an idol, that I thought I knew better than God, which is something I was accused of because I would ask really what I thought were extremely obvious questions. Yeah, so I think that when we think about kids coming here, like, first of all, this isn't a kid's show. You know, if you're a grown-up watching, thinking about, watch with discretion. We say swear words. I talk about my boobs sometimes. So, like, it's not something that I would recommend to children necessarily, but I think the fact that we deal with their questions seriously and honestly and are willing to say, I don't know, I think that's why children end up here. And by children, I mean anyone under 18, because in my mind, anyone under 18 is a baby.
Also, can I just say, and that this isn't directed at Cliff because he didn't make this argument. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But can I just say, oh my God, the hypocrisy among Christians to have the audacity to, and again, I'm getting this just from many, many, many other Christians who I've talked to that are like, you're indoctrinating the youth. How dare you? And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? You have how many private schools and religious schools that are shoving this stuff down kids' throats without teaching the alternate position at all whatsoever, other than maybe a straw man position of it, and indoctrinating them by the millions, and now defunding things like the Department of Education, trying to get rid of it. And it's like, to then tell us that we are indoctrinating the youth simply because we're providing the world with the alternative opinion, which is actually the scientific consensus opinion that is based in evidence and grounded in reason and logic and critical thought. And like, they're upset at us for simply having the free speech to express ourselves. Is the Bible that fragile? Is God that incapable and inept that he can't defend his position with facts and reason and evidence, that some call-in show is going to somehow destroy the Bible? If so, it's probably not a holy book.
I love it. I mean, also, I love the idea of us being the sole force of like, Talk Heathen did it, They took down the Bible once and for all. But I think that what you're saying, brings me back to kind of my intro about people really think there's Christian babies. They think that like it's just so inherently evident and so true, and that they have the right to tell children that they will burn in hell if they don't believe, and then are shocked when we actually think that it's maybe better for them to live without that stuff. Yeah, it is really interesting.
Could jump on another one. If you guys want to call in the show, there's still openings, there's slots. So the number's on the screen. Pick it up. Let us know what you think. If I enraged you with something that I said, if Sophia has radically pissed you off, then
it'll be because I mentioned my boobs.
We do have another theist caller that I would love to get to. This is Cyrus, him from Ohio. Welcome to Talk Heathen. It sounds like you want to talk about the person and existence of Christ. Go for it.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So really my message here today is that, Jesus, God in the flesh, he died for our sins and rose from the grave. If you receive the free gift of eternal life, you'll be saved from eternal punishment. I hear. How do you? I think it's Richard.
And then why do you? No, we don't want you to preach on the show. We want to know why you believe that. So that's what you believe. Why do you believe it?
Well, I was actually going to go to one of, I believe it was Richard. He was talking to the last caller about stopping where the evidence stops. So I was kind of just going to come off of that, but if you want me to say why I believe
go for it. Yeah, I mean the main topic of discussion, we're kind of trying to get to, why you believe all this. Because if you're correct, we also want to be correct. Why do you believe all this is true? Yeah, well,
I'll try to keep it short. I don't want to have to. There's a lot of people listening. I don't want to have to give my whole life story, but I grew up in church and stuff like that. But it came a time in college where I moved away And, I started doing things and seeking things kind of on my own, wanting to seek answers for myself. So I guess if you wanted to call it deep thinking, philosophy, this and that. For the first time, I was smoking weed, things like that. But I took away. So just so you know, I'm not just speaking from a biased standpoint, but I stepped away from that faith. And, I really was seeking, and I wasn't finding any truth in anything else. And I encountered the person, the Holy Spirit of Christ.
What do you mean?
And that's
sorry to interrupt you.
Why,
but what do you mean? What do you mean you found truth or you didn't find truth in these other things? What were you doing to try to ascertain what the truth is?
Yeah, sure. I think deep down, whether people would agree at face value or not, a lot of people are searching for like a sense of peace. And that's why a lot of medicines are produced, is like healing. How do we stop death? How do we not have pain and suffering? So, really when I say I found truth, the truth found me. I'd get temporary peace from smoking weed. I get temporary peace from a moral value. Say, oh, I won't eat pork. That's a moral. I'll have this moral superiority, and I'll have this peace. But none of that worked. I really needed the person of Christ in my heart.
So
might sound.
So does the feeling of peace equal truth? Does finding peace in something make it true?
Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that, if you want peace, you should know the truth, genuinely.
So, but then we're in a little bit of a circle, right? So if we say that you found the truth because it was the one that gave you the most peace that wasn't temporary peace, but then you're saying that if you find truth, then that should give you peace. So you're using peace to find the truth, and then truth is giving you peace. So I'm still not quite clear on how we determine which sources of peace are correct ones and which ones aren't. Because if I've met people who say that they found peace in Hinduism, I've met people who have found peace through Islam. How do I know which one of you is correct?
Absolutely. And I think that's where you can start to read those scriptures for yourself. You could study Hinduism and you could study Christianity, which I'm not saying you haven't. But historically,
Hello.
The resurrection of Christ.
Hello, I've got my hand up.
Can you hear me?
May I speak? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm trying to respond to you. I've studied Islam, the scriptures of Islam. I've studied Christianity. I've studied the scriptures of Buddhism. I've had a little bit of a look at the scriptures of Islam, Hinduism and Taoism. I'm not convinced on any of them. I know people who've become Buddhist monks. I know people who've become Catholic nuns. I know people who've converted to Islam. I know people who have no religion and are exceptionally peaceful and at peace in themselves. I'm one of them. I'm very, very happy. I've got a very good life with very few problems. And when problems do arise, I surpass them largely with peace. I'm a peaceful person. I consider that I have found peace. And I do not see anything in what you've said that I've not heard friends who are Muslims say, that I've not heard friends who are Buddhists say, that I've not heard friends who, I dare say, different sects of Christianity than you are say. So what I think what Ben's asking and what I'm really interested in is, how do you determine that what you believe is true? Because you've spent a lot of time telling us what you believe, and we don't doubt that you believe it, but the important part is, how do you get to that belief, and how do you confirm that belief that is, that can differentiate it from people of alternative and sometimes contradictory belief systems, which have also followed the same methodology and are giving the same reasoning and the same responses as you. Something has to give because you can't all be right. So how are you determining that truth?
Yeah, well, am I allowed to ask you, do you believe in a God at all?
No.
No, neither of us do.
You don't?
No.
Okay. So if we want to go to just like scientific proof for, there's proof for, say, an explosion, which people call the Big Bang, right? But
it wasn't an explosion, but go on.
Isaac Newton says where there's a cause, there's an effect. So there has to be something behind that. It can't just be out of nowhere. And that's where it's unlogical.
So here's the thing though.
Finding truth.
Even if the Big Bang wasn't true, I still don't have a reason to believe in a God. Because we, even atheists.
No, I didn't say it wasn't true.
Most of us, but most of us are not saying that things definitely came from nothing. I just don't know. I don't know where everything came from. I don't have good reason to believe that God is the answer in that scenario.
And
there's things that I might not know, and that's okay.
Cyrus, I want to just jump in quickly before you go on to your, Cyrus. Sorry, I just want to jump in quickly before you go on to your next point as well. First of all, it was, and I need to say this, and I know I quickly shouted it at you while you were talking, but it wasn't an explosion, and that's just a pet hate when people call it an explosion. It frustrates me. It wasn't an explosion. That's not what the Big Bang was. And yes, the Big Bang, the demarcation line, the Big Bang is a demarcation line we put in between this thing that we have that we understand and this thing that we don't understand. And the part that we understand is sufficient to explain what we call the Big Bang. What we have difficulty with is the prior points to that. We have difficulty with it because we don't have information for it. We just don't have any information. So what we're left then with is speculation. Now we've got lots of different religions, the Hinduism and Islam both agree with the Big Bang. They have different interpretations of it, but they both agree with it. Buddhism doesn't. Buddhism thinks that there was an eternal regress into the past in universes. But they're all these different ideas. But what we've got from the Big Bang is we've got a certain set of information and then the information stops. Now, we can all agree on that information. We don't need to go into the mechanics of the Big Bang because, you've said you accept it, and fair enough. But what we need to do then is say, right, why are you then jumping from this point of the information stops and we do not know what was there, the prior inference from it, the prior cause to the Big Bang, if indeed there was one, beyond what we already understand, to God, because you're doing here what the last caller did. You're stopping where the evidence stops and you're making a leap. So how are we bridging that gap?
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't just come up with the idea of God. When I say the Big Bang, I'm really meaning a point in time where things came into existence. I'd have to brush up on the details of the Big Bang, but there most certainly was a time where things came into order and there was a sequence and a design. And so when you see that there's design,
no. Let me stop you, Cyrus. Sorry. I need to stop you there. There wasn't a design. There was a sequence of events. What we had was an infinitely hot, infinitely dense point. And for some reason, which we do not know the reason, that point cooled down and expanded. It is that demarcation line right there where it started to cool down and expand, where we say, right, this is the Big Bang, this is the beginning of the universe. But nothing in that, nothing in the evidence we have at all suggests that there was a design involved in it, any kind of will involved in it. There is nothing at all there in the evidence that suggests that. So why are you making that leap? Because you've just said, I'm not making the leap, but there's got to be this thing. But why has there got to be this thing? Because that's not in the evidence.
Well, if you look at a Tesla, for example, would you say that there's a design within the Tesla?
Yes, because we know a Tesla is designed. There is not that evidence for design in the Big Bang.
We have other examples of Teslas. We have examples of Teslas being made. You could go to a factory and watch them be made in front of you. There's a difference here with we have multiple examples of a Tesla, and we can evaluate this process. We have an n equals 1.
So there's many
universe for what we know. We have this one example of this reality that we're living in. We have nothing to compare it to. We have no evidence of something similar. Like the information we have is the information we have. So these are different examples.
So, an indigenous tribal group who's never come across that form of technology, when they first see it, they could conclude.
No, they're probably going to think, a person made it because it's an example of a 3D object in this physical universe that we have seen, and we've seen other objects similar be made. Right? It's something that you see characteristics. You see characteristics. You see characteristics of something that is man-made, and there are some pretty clear tells. Like oftentimes, something that is in nature isn't made of those materials combined together. It doesn't have those shapes combined together. It doesn't have the motor parts that are working in that manner. There's things that are distinctly different, and we can look at patterns and say, this appears to be something that a human made, and this appears to be something that was naturally existing. There are some times when that line can be blurred because, we're dealing with natural components and like natural processes. I mean, a person making something is ultimately a natural process because a person is natural and goes with natural inspirations for things. So like you're taking things that we already have categories to organize those pieces of information. This is different from what you're claiming. Like you're trying to say that these two concepts are related and necessarily related. And I don't believe that. I don't believe they have to be.
Okay, well, you're saying now you're going to belief, so you're jumping to a conclusion, to a leap of faith.
No, because a belief is saying that I don't have 100% confirmation of what I'm saying. I'm fairly confident based on, repetition in the fact that we've seen this happen before. We've seen how this is done before. I can have a certain level of confidence in what I'm saying. However, I acknowledge that there is a margin of error. There is room to say, maybe I'm incorrect in this. And that's what we have to do, that we have the best information that we have. Of course, there's room to be wrong. But in that's why if I say belief, that is something that I am asserting that I don't have full confidence in. And that's, a whole separate conversation maybe on what is a belief and what is knowledge. It sounds like I'm maybe making less of a confident assertion than many religious people would.
Cyrus, may I ask you where you've kind of... Cyrus, may I ask you, because you're talking, you're kind of giving us this design kind of argument. Where have you kind of got this information from? What has informed you on this design argument? what like putting forward this proposition that, well, Tesla's been made, so therefore, the universe must also be designed because we see the hallmarks of design in the universe, etc., which we don't. But what has informed you? What reading have you done to inform? Is this just your own musings, or is something informed you? What sources have informed you on this, etc.?
Well, I'd say a couple things, two things specific. Just consciously, whether you subscribe to a certain moral belief or not, we all kind of have these right versus wrong in our head of like a judge, like a ruler who says, who has to judge between two people. This is right and this is wrong. So I had this moral compass consciously, which said, when I look at this tree, it's clearly has purpose to it because it works perfectly with the ecosystem, and the rain helps it grow. The tree gives food to animals. This doesn't seem random. So that was one.
Cyrus, you're using intuition. This sense in your head of something being right and something being wrong, can that sense be incorrect?
Absolutely.
So how did you know that you were making the right intuitive decision there?
Because I kept studying, and I actually,
what were you studying?
Mentioned earlier, my testimony.
But that's what we're getting at. What were you studying? What sources? Because clearly sources influenced your intuition. What influenced that?
Sure. Anything that I could study, really. I mean, science class.
Can you give examples?
Oceanography, botany.
So you're giving some broad. So you're giving some broad fields, right? But what specifically convinced you of the design argument? Like, what sources did you use?
Well, I'm trying to say that both is that it's in, like, even in botany, if you look, I forget the exact name of it. It's like Tetra something, but there's patterns within plants that line up.
We are pattern seeking. That's how our brains work. Sorry for interrupting again, but that's how our brains work.
No, you're fine.
Our brains work by pattern seeking. Our brains work by pattern seeking.
Yeah, neural.
So when we see things that, for example, like a plant that has these, and bear in mind when you're looking at these things in science textbooks, and this is not my field of study, by the way, so I might crucify this, but I have looked at a couple of science textbooks with plants in. They give a very kind of black and white, shall we say, representation. I'm going to jump back onto cosmology because I know a little bit more about it. So when we're looking into like a cosmology textbook, what we get is a representation of the Big Bang. So you usually get like a point at which the Big Bang began. And then you get like a representation of usually a V coming out, a sideways V coming out of it with the kind of different epochs of the universe. It looks all very neat and tidy and formal in those representations, but they're just textbooks representations simplified to help us understand it. And I think that, coupled with the fact that the way our brains work is by seeking patterns, can give us this erroneous view that there is some kind of purpose. These are more, these things that have a purpose, or these things are more strictly design looking than they are in reality, because we're putting this kind of very black and white emphasis on it because of the way we interpret information. And I think that's a problem when we're kind of trying to interpret this stuff, because it can look very much like this stuff has a strict kind of code. And, one thing, I don't know if you've said it, but one thing a lot of people say in these conversations is well, they kind of give this dichotomy of it was designed or by accident or pure chance. But that's a false dichotomy. That's not true. You know, that it was not designed doesn't mean that the only other option is chance. There are processes in place that follow, that inform this. It's like when you rolled a ball down a hill. If you had knowledge of all the physics involved, you would be able to predict exactly where that ball ended, because you know you can extrapolate that from the information that you have. There's no design involved in there. You know, if you put a ball at the top of the hill and the wind blows the ball down the hill, there's no design in the path that takes. Even if we could work it out exactly, there would still be no design in there. But if you're trying to look for a pattern in that, then it might appear like that there is a purpose behind that ball rolling down that hill and ending where it ends. And that's the mistake the human brain makes when it's trying to figure this stuff out. The kind of reason I asked you where you kind of got your information from was because you sounded very much like you was. Have you heard of a guy called William Paley?
No. William Paley, you said?
Yeah, William Paley, Paley.
I'll have to look him up now.
He was born in the 18th century and he was a clergyman, and he came up with this thing called the watchmaker argument, which very much describes, is very similar to what you were saying about the Tesla. It's saying if you found a watch and you saw it and you just looked at it, wouldn't you think it had a designer? Because, you know, it has all the components of design in there. And surely this is the same as the universe. The universe must have a designer because it appears to have all these components in there. William Paley was making the same mistake I've just described, that it was reading into patterns that aren't there. There's no evidence in the formation of the universe as we understand it that suggests that was by design. It may appear that way if you're seeking a pattern out of it, but there is no evidence there that suggests it. No physics papers are describing the Big Bang. Not even like popular science books talking about the subject. And I've got a few. In fact, I've got one right in front of me right now. Look, there it is. And I read from that doing my tech check before the show just to make my sound was okay, because I would just happen to have it on my desk. You know, there's lots of stuff in these things that describe the process, and none of them indicate at all that there was a design or a design was necessary. And you seem to be making the same mistake William Paley made. Sorry, go on.
No worries. So what I'm hearing you conclude is that that these recognition of patterns is just a figment of imagination.
It's not. No, it's just not reliable. It's just not reliable to be evidence.
And it's not a figment of imagination. It's the way the brain interprets things.
Just the fact that a pattern exists is not reliable evidence. It can be if there's a pattern that can be replicated over and over and over again. It can be useful, but that doesn't mean that you can make the jump to this is a useful pattern for me to recognize. Because like Richard is saying, patterns are a way for humans to organize information. Like we'll take the pattern and we will synthesize that information and then utilize that for something else. That's how, math was invented, is a way to take the patterns that we see and make something useful out of those patterns. But just because there seems to be a pattern does not mean that there's other significance. Does that make sense?
Sure. How many patterns would be necessary for you to conclude that there was?
The point is, no, it's not
it?
just it's not just the amount of patterns. I'm saying that you don't need to have a pattern for it to be true, and having a pattern doesn't make it true. So a pattern can, be part of the equation that you're trying to use for your argument, but it's not enough. A pattern in itself is not enough.
And regarding the universe, the answer to how many is one. We have one universe. We have one universe that we can have a look at and, assess. And if you extrapolate a pattern from that, then you've got nothing else to compare it to. And I want to give you, because me and Ben have talked quite a lot, Cyrus, I'm going to give you like a good stretch now to kind of share your thoughts on what we've said so far, and then add anything if you want to, because I do appreciate we've had quite a lot to say, and I do want to give you the opportunity because we do appreciate your opinion. So, I'm going to let you talk now.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful to be on the show. Okay. You're letting me go.
I wasn't getting rid of you. I was giving you a chance to respond.
Yeah. I hear you now. I hear you. Yeah, I mean, I just say, there's sufficient evidence. I mean, I'm praying for you guys. Yeah.
But that's just saying sufficient evidence. We've just spent a good amount of time telling you why, patterns, for example, aren't sufficient evidence. So what is the sufficient evidence?
Well, so you're saying the scientific method isn't,
No. There's a lot of misunderstandings in what the scientific method is. There's a lot of misunderstandings in what it is. And I think one of the biggest errors that particularly religious people will make is that they'll assume that the scientific method is there to prove an assertion. But the problem is the scientific method is not about me saying, I believe in this thing to be true. I'm going to do this experiment to prove that that thing is true. The scientific method is there to explore questions. You have a question, and let's say that question is, what is the origin of the universe? Or is there an origin to the universe? You have some kind of vague question that you don't put bias into. You just have the question. Your hypothesis can be, what you expect the outcome to be based on, what you know. But then you put an experiment in place to test it. You actually have to test that hypothesis. And you can either accept that, the null hypothesis is true, or you can accept that the alternative hypothesis is true. And in that case, you're not necessarily even accepting the alternative, you are rejecting the null. So none of this is to prove what you've already believed. It's to answer a question. And so I think what the problem with what you're doing is you already believe something, and now you're trying to use the scientific method to back up that, instead of starting from a neutral place and saying, what is true? Does that make sense?
We're just not agreeing. I mean, are you interested in historical evidence?
Cyrus, you're bouncing back and forth to things. The standard of evidence that we have is pretty simple and it's pretty consistent. It sounds like you're scrambling to find things that agree with something that you already believed. What we've done is we've said, I don't accept any position until it can be demonstrated to be true. So we're starting from a place of, I don't accept any of these religious claims. So if we take the null hypothesis being, I don't accept, or even if you want to take a null of saying, I don't know if there are any, it's a pretty neutral place to be. You have to then add on evidence to back up that any of that is true. And so that same standard of evidence goes for any other religion on the table. And so it's not about necessarily having like, it's not that I'm not convinced by a pattern. It's not that I'm not convinced by historical evidence, scientific evidence. You just haven't presented any actual evidence. The argument you gave for the pattern, like we told you why we don't accept that as evidence.
I mean, you guys, I don't understand why, like, sufficient evidence. There's lots and lots and lots of evidence. I mean, it's really just foolish
provide it.
to say that.
Then
but
bring
you've
it.
not presented any. All you've done so far is said, well, I think the universe looks designed, therefore I'm concluding it is designed. Yet the evidence that we have, the actual evidence by the people who study the universe, do not find that it is designed. I've had
many scientists are theists. Many.
Yeah, but they don't show it in the papers, and that's exactly what I was just about to say. I have had occasion to interact with astrophysicists who are Christian believers and Christian apologists, and I have asked many times when they make the claim, God made this, I have asked many times, where have you shown that in your work? And do you know what the answer is? Silence. The answer's silence, because despite them being very, very good scientists, they have not shown that in their work. And interestingly enough, I just showed you that book a few minutes ago that I was reading before the show in the sound check. The passage I was reading, which I had open on there purposefully because it was informing some of the work I'm doing outside the ACA. The passage I was reading was actually about the Catholic priest who was the first person, may not be necessarily, but the first person who kind of cited the Big Bang, who came up with the Big Bang theory. And he himself retracted from his own work any suggestion that this was proof of God. Proof of Genesis, proof of God. He didn't want that. And Pope Pius, and I think it was the 1950s, I can't remember the exact year, Pope Pius actually made a statement based on this Catholic priest's Big Bang theory. He actually made a statement to the Vatican saying that the Big Bang was proof of God. And this Catholic priest came out and argued against that, saying, no, it's not. That is not true. And there was a big thing about it. You can go and read about it, the kind of schism between Pope Pius and Lemaitre, I can't remember his name, some French dude or Belgium. No, we're Belgium. I'm not even getting his nationality right. Belgium Catholic priest. There was a big schism about it, a big argument about it, because the Pope had made this statement, and the guy who'd come up with the idea of the Big Bang himself actually disagreed with them and said, no, this isn't evidence. This isn't evidence. Lemaitre, thank you, Toughen Up Fluffy, in the chat. And you can go and read about this whole thing. You can go, there's actually the papers, and I know this because I've used them in the book I'm writing. I've actually cited it in the book I'm writing. There's the full address made by the Pope, by Pope Pius, where he makes this declaration. It's not the case that this is evidence. And somebody being a scientist and believing that doesn't mean that they've shown it in their work. And we have a problem. We have a problem, even if we're going to make that suggestion, because you might say, this Christian cosmologist is a believer in God. And this Christian cosmologist believes that God created the universe. But then we have a problem, because we might have an Islamic cosmologist who believes the same thing, and a Hindu cosmologist who believes the same thing. And they're citing it as evidence that their religion is true. So we come back to this thing that we had at the very start of this call, which is, how do we differentiate? when we've got this thing we're saying is evidence of our religion, how do we differentiate that? How do we show that that is true when we have these contradictory ideas that are also claiming the exact same evidence to inform them? Now, we've got this thing on...
Well, I
Go
think,
on, please.
Okay.
No, Cyrus, please, I'm giving you a chance to respond. Yeah, no, you go. You keep talking, please.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So I think one of the issues here is evidence of something that you can't see. That seems to be one of the issues here. For example, I mean, you can't see radioactivity, but the evidence for it is there.
Yeah, we have evidence because radioactivity affects things in our reality. We have evidence that radioactivity we have ways of detecting it. We have ways of measuring cancer in people who have sustained a certain amount of radiation. We have thresholds of toxicity. We have demonstrable evidence that certain things we can't see are there. For example, for a long time, we thought that germs didn't exist because we didn't see them. And then now we are able to see them. We're able to see atoms now. So yeah, there are things that we can't necessarily see that are real and that are true, but they have sufficient evidence to demonstrate their existence. We still do not have that for a deity of any kind.
Well, I think that's just where you don't want to really accept the evidence.
No, give the evidence.
What is the evidence? Because you haven't presented it. What is the evidence?
I've given evidence, so it's just what evidence do you want?
You have not. You've made an intuition statement saying, I think this thing is true. I'm going to believe it. That's essentially what you've given us.
Not only have you not given evidence, but we've explained why what you've presented isn't evidence. Not only have you not given evidence,
you've admitted that there's room for error of where things could be a clear.
Cyrus, how confident are you?
Man-made or natural.
Cyrus, how confident are you that your God is real?
100%.
100%. So you believe 100% confidence that this is true. How and yet you've yet to give us evidence that would warrant that level of confidence. Even the things that are completely demonstrable, like I've mentioned, and I told you that I will accept a room for error. But I have, there's certain things I have very high levels of confidence in. It's very, very rare if I will ever get to 100% confidence in anything. But you're going to come here and say that you have 100% confidence, and yet your evidence that you brought to the table is a pattern that doesn't back up the claim that you're trying to assert.
The literature itself in the field that you're asserting it in doesn't attribute that as evidence of design. So where is this evidence, Cyrus?
You said it doesn't.
The field, the field
no
that you've
for design and creation. And I mean, we see it.
No, we don't. This is the thing that we've literally walked you through this. There are no papers in cosmology that state that the universe is designed. That none, not a single one. There are zero papers in cosmology, even by cosmologists of various faiths who believe in God. There are no papers. So where are you getting yes, there is from? Because no, there isn't. There seems to be a very, very strong wish from you that there is, but that's not the case. It's not reflected in the actual literature of the field that you're citing.
Just because you haven't read it doesn't mean that It doesn't.
No, it's not there. It's not there. It's not in the literature. It's not there. I've read mountains and mountains of cosmological papers. It's not there. And there is not one out there that I just happen to have missed. And all the other cosmologists who've come to a consensus on this subject have just happened to miss that says, or that provides this groundbreaking evidence. It's not there. And the thing is, if you're saying, yes, it is there, point it out to us. What, sorry? Say that again.
Well, you mentioned someone who did write. Yes. You mentioned someone who did, I think you said in the 1800s, who did write about it, but...
That wasn't a cosmologist.
You don't...
William Paley was a priest.
Because someone refuted it.
It has been refuted.
Cosmologist.
He made a bad argument.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. As in, like, scientists.
William Paley was an Anglican clergyman. He wasn't a cosmologist. He didn't study the universe, and he was born in the 19th century. 18th century.
So what you mean is he didn't have a degree, and
no,
he didn't have a degree.
I mean, he wasn't a cosmologist. He wasn't up on the latest cosmology. He didn't study the stuff. He was an Anglican priest who came up with a philosophical argument for God. It had nothing to do with cosmology. It had nothing to do with the Big Bang, which wasn't even known at that time. William Paley didn't cite anything to do with the Big Bang proving God because he didn't know about the Big Bang. Nobody did. The first there was Einstein came up with some I forgot what the word is, calculations. There was a guy from I think he was Russian or something like that. I can't remember his name. Or where he came from. I think he was Russian. Someone in the chat will correct me, who went through these calculations and said, because Einstein came up with the calculations which showed an expanding universe, and Einstein thought he'd made a mistake. Then this other chap came along and said, no, Einstein, you've not made a mistake. They had a bit of a to and fro in this journal, in this German journal. And then Einstein ended up apologizing to him. He said, you know what? You're actually a bit cleverer than me on this. Your maths works out better than mine does. The universe is expanding. And then George Lemaitre came along, who actually figured out that it was for the first time. That's why we call it the Big Bang. That's not why we call it Big Bang, but that's who we cite why we cite the Big Bang theory to him, because he was the first one who said, yes, we've got an expanding universe, but it's actually coming from a single point. And then somebody, I think it was Edwin Hubble, came along and said, I don't like that idea. I'm going to derogatory call it a Big Bang, blah, 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 blah. But George Paley knew nothing about this because this was way after George Paley's lifetime. So he had nothing to do with it. He came up with an argument about a clock, which has been debunked. It's a silly argument. David Hume, who you can read about all in this, I'd suggest you go and read this book, Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, was a philosopher who debunked lots and lots of arguments brought together by theists, theological arguments, brought together by theists saying they are silly, they don't work, and boom, everything you've talked about was debunked by David Hume many, many, many years ago in that book. Go and read that. What else have you got? Because what you brought to us so far doesn't work.
A lot of Greek philosophers who wouldn't even subscribe. A lot of Greek philosophers who didn't even subscribe to the Jewish Torah scriptures. I mean, they believed in a God. So when you guys don't
believe in anything,
believe in a God,
even if they were correct, they didn't
anything.
believe in your God. Even if they were correct, they didn't believe in your God. So what are you trying to say now? Are you trying to say my God's not true because Greek philosophers believed in a God? Why don't you follow their God?
At the beginning, you both said that you didn't believe. At the beginning, you both said that you didn't believe in a God.
I don't.
No, we don't.
I don't.
So, but a lot of.
So Cyrus, does everything that Greek philosopher, do you believe that everything that Greek philosophers believed is true? Do you believe that they were right about everything?
Oh, but no.
Right. So this is something that I would agree that they were wrong about.
But you get a lot of your information from them. Okay.
Right, but there's some information that's true and there's some information that is not true. And so that's where you have to be skeptical and say what information is correct and what isn't. And what methods do we use to determine which information is true and which ones aren't? And that's where we're disagreeing, because the methods that you're using are not good methods. And we keep trying to show you that.
Well, I mean, I told you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I came with, what I had to say. So, I mean, I guess we can end it there. I'm, glad we got to talk.
Cyrus, I suggest go away. Cyrus. Go away. Gather your thoughts.
I'm listening.
Okay, gather your thoughts. And there is a bit of a delay, so sorry, I appreciate it. It sounds like we keep butting in. There is a delay, and sometimes makes us talk over each other. So we're not kind of being rude on purpose here, and we understand that you're not being rude when you talk over us. No. It's just the delay. But go away, gather your thoughts, because you've come into this very, very disjointed. Rewatch the call, go and look at some of the things that have been cited, go and look at William Paley's arguments, go and read up on David Hume's kind of dialogues concerning natural religion, where he debunks a lot of these arguments from the theists at the time. Go and have a look at the controversy with Pope Pius and Lemaitre and that kind of thing. Have a look at that, gather your thoughts, and when you come back not with this kind of jumble of ideas that you've got, but have a look and have a real think about what to you is the thing that, if you've got an opportunity here to us, to the hosts of the show. You might not get me and Ben when you call back, you might get different hosts, but think to yourself, I've got this opportunity here. I've got these two hosts and all their viewers, many of whom are atheists, to really put forward really good evidence for God's existence, which will convince them that it is true. Try and find what you consider to be the very best evidence for God's existence, and kind of have a listen back to this call, listen to what me and Ben have talked to you about and the methodology and how we kind of work through things and reasoning and things like that. And then have a look at that evidence, try and gather your thoughts so you can present it as clearly and concisely as possible. And it doesn't have to be what we've talked about today. You mentioned historical evidence earlier. Bring that to the table if you like. And let's sit there and really work through it. Let's really, really work through it, but bring something concise. Bring, what you consider the very, very best evidence for God's existence, particularly your God's existence, because it's not much point saying to us, well, Greek philosophers in the 5th century BC believed in God, because they didn't believe in the same God you believe in. So that doesn't really get us anywhere. We're just introducing a third party that we don't need to talk about. So, really, really gather your thoughts, gather your evidence, give us a call back when you're ready. Doesn't have to be next week. Really gather your thoughts, have a read up on some of the stuff we've talked about. Give us a call back when you're ready, and let's have that conversation. And let's try and not make it jump from one thing to another as it has a little bit today. I appreciate some of that's due to the delay and is kind of over speaking each other. But let's really, really have that conversation and go through what you consider the very, very best evidence for God's existence. Ben, anything else?
No, I think that's where we're at. Just I think really think about what makes you so confident, because 100% confidence is a lot, and you really have to back that up. So thinking about why do I believe what I believe, and is it just that you want to believe this, or do you have something more concrete that you can give us? Because if something is true, we should have evidence of this. So yeah, that's the big thing I would ask, because I know Richard gave a lot of homework. But I definitely want you to call back. I do think that I appreciate how kind you've been in this call. I appreciate this back and forth. I really do hope that you do call in again. Let's talk to Fireman, him from Texas. Wants to talk about the contradictions in atheism. Fireman, you are live on Talk Heathen. What specifically do you mean?
Oh, did you add him to the? Did you answer his?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me?
There you go.
Yeah, we got you, Fireman.
Yeah. What do you mean by contradictions in atheism?
No. First I come into a room and I just try to be polite. How y'all gentlemen doing today?
Doing great, Fireman.
Doing okay.
How are you?
Great. I'm all right, man. Now
Awesome.
we can get to the topic at hand. What I mean is, it seems that even though you don't believe in God as atheist, you still uphold the same values as a lot of the same values. Maybe not everything, but a lot of the same values as Christian doctrine. So
Okay.
I'm trying to understand. I've found this discrepancy within atheism belief, and I'm trying to get an understanding of why you're still holding on to what most Christians would call sin. Why are you still upholding those values?
Fireman, do you think that Christianity was the first belief system to come up with those views?
No.
Wait, I just want to know, what's the contradiction? What's the contradiction?
Listen, I've been talking to enough of you atheists. I knew you was going to run. I know all the talking points you're going to run to.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that you'll have answers for us then.
Yes, I'm just that good. I knew you was going to run to that they're in other books. Well, sir, guess what? All that would mean is that those books are right too, and you're still wrong. Yeah, you can say, oh, it's in the Quran or the Book of the Dead. You can say whatever book you want to bring out. But the fact of the matter is, you're still upholding that value. And why are you upholding
just because
those values?
Fireman, does agreeing on something disprove anything?
Yeah, it does.
Does agreeing on moral values disprove anything? How?
Yes, it does.
How does it disprove an atheist perspective?
All right. Would atheists consider themselves a religion?
No.
No, right?
No.
Now let me ask you this. Do you still have a belief? Do you believe in something?
Everyone has beliefs. Not all of those beliefs are religious beliefs.
Has a belief now, right? So you would say that you have a belief. Now everyone doesn't have a belief, and I can prove you there's a group that doesn't have a belief.
Define a belief.
What do you mean by belief here? Because if you mean the same thing that I mean when I say belief, what you just said is utterly ridiculous. So what do you mean when you say other people don't have beliefs? What do you mean by belief?
Well, when I mean belief, that means that you believe in something. That something has a purpose.
No, that's not a definition. You use the same word to define itself. When you define a word, you can't use that word again. So when you say somebody has a belief, without using the word belief or believe or believing or believer, what does that mean to have a belief?
That means that you think things are a certain way, should be a certain way.
Okay, so you accept things that are true. Do you think there's anybody who ever existed who doesn't accept some things are true?
What you mean you accept things? A belief doesn't mean, that only means that you think it's true.
That's what you said. That's what your definition of belief was. So you said
I'll give you the definition again. Belief means you think something is true, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So that's what I said. And so if you're saying that there are people and you're going to prove it, You're going to prove that there are people that don't have any beliefs. So what you're saying is there are people that do not accept things that are true or accept things to be true.
No, that's your definition of belief, something that's true. I said it's something that you think is true. That's what my definition of belief is. Not mean
something that Scott thinks is true.
You think that is true. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you saying there are people that don't, I don't know. I'm having trouble following you. Are you saying that belief is what Scott thinks is true?
People that don't have a belief, sir.
Okay. All right. Who are they?
That's what I'm saying.
Who are they?
Nihilists believe that nothing matters. They believe that nothing matters. There's no good or bad or right or wrong. And I'm right about it.
Hold on. So fireman, how can someone, you're saying that people who, are you saying that nihilists don't have a belief?
Well, technically, remember when you said everybody has a belief? Technically, you can say that. But at the end of the day, they believe that nothing matters. But the difference between them and the atheists is the atheists believe that's a belief, and he believes that things matter.
The point I was just getting to, fireman, is you said that there are people who do not have beliefs, mention nihilists, and then said that nihilists believe something.
Yes,
so you're
exactly
contradicting yourself.
You can't even get 8 words into the sentence. You said,
listen, sir, I agree when you said that.
I'm listening. That's the problem with what you're saying, is I'm listening.
Because no matter who you are, I don't care if you have a brain and can walk around, you believe something. So that's the conundrum about it, sir. So I would agree with you on that.
So you're saying that nihilists have no beliefs, and you know this because they believe that nothing matters. That's what Dr. Ben was talking about.
I'll tell you this if it makes sense. They believe that there's no beliefs.
Okay, so they're wrong.
That's a contradiction.
That's a contradiction.
It is.
But we do not accept that.
They believe that it is a contradiction. But they believe that nothing matters. So you have to use the word.
But that's not. But fireman, that's not us. Fireman, that's not us. We do not accept that position. That is a contradiction. Do you want to talk to us about our beliefs, or are you just going to try to talk in circles and talk about contradictions?
Right. When we said we want to know, when we ask you what's the contradiction, we're talking about the contradiction that you're saying is in atheism, not about a contradiction that might be for some kind. There are other kinds of nihilism, by the way, but for some kinds of nihilism, there are contradictory positions. You're saying there's a contradictory position in atheism. Atheism just means we don't believe that there's a God. We have other beliefs in other things.
They're also atheists who are spiritual, who don't believe in a God, but do believe in ghosts. They may believe in spirits. They may believe in other like beings like cryptids, etc. Like that's not our position necessarily, but to say that atheists don't have beliefs is inaccurate. And even if we can't even limit atheism to people who don't have a supernatural belief, because there are some people out there like that, but they're still atheists.
Are you with us, fireman?
Yeah, I'm still with y'all, man.
So what is the contradiction in atheism? That's what I want. We're still on step 1 of your call. You claim that there's contradictions found in atheism. What is the contradiction? And by contradiction, I mean A and not A. What's the contradiction stems from atheism?
I think that we got caught up in the word believe. So I'll use the word think. I'll say that nihilists think that nothing matters. And what I'm saying is that would seem more appropriate because the atheist is saying, hey, we don't believe in God, but hey, we do believe stealing is wrong. We believe that unalive somebody is wrong.
Fireman,
that's not a contradiction.
Those are not the same position either, because nihilism, you're talking about nihilism, which is a position about significance of things ultimately. that's not at all related to the position of is there a God or is there not a God. You can be both an atheist and a nihilist. You could be an atheist and not a nihilist. But what you're mentioning is not a view of like a God belief. Like we can have beliefs of whether or not there's significance, and that's still not related at all to the God question.
Fireman, I want to hold your feet to the fire here to mix my puns here a little bit. I want to hold your feet to the fire. You said there's a contradiction in atheism. I don't want to hear about nihilism. Some atheists are nihilists and some are not. I'm not. I'm an atheist. You're saying that there's a contradiction found in atheism, and I want you to be very specific. And I want you to say it first. And then I'll give you time to explain it afterwards. But I want to know, and a contradiction is a position where you're holding something to be true and false simultaneously. That's a contradiction. Okay, so I want you to tell me, what is the contradiction found in atheism?
Do you believe somebody can do an act that's evil?
That's a question. That's a question. I want you to tell me, what is the contradiction found in atheism that you're claiming exists?
I'm trying to show you the contradiction by asking you questions, sir.
Okay,
Do you think that somebody can commit an act that's evil?
Say that again, please.
That you would consider. Do you think somebody can commit an act and you would say that was evil?
That when I say something is evil, yes. There are things that I would call evil.
So therefore, all I'm telling you is that the Bible says that there are things
Hold on.
that are evil.
Hold on. No. Before we get to the Bible,
holding the same value
you asked
as the
me.
Bible.
All right, Fireman, you're changing the subject here. I said I believe that there are things people can make an action that I would call evil. I want to know, how is that a contradiction?
Because you say you don't agree with the Bible. You don't believe in God. We get that.
I never said that.
I don't agree with the Bible. But
I never said I don't agree with the Bible on everything.
Oh, so you don't agree? Hey, you just proved my point. You have a lot in common with Christians.
So are you saying that I can agree with some of the things you say and not some of the things you say? Is that what you're saying? We can kind of agree on some things and disagree on other things, because that's the same relationship I have with the Bible. There are some things that are in the Bible that I'm fine with and that I also agree with. I don't agree with them because they're in the Bible, but I also agree with them. There are also things in the Bible that I disagree with, and there are things in the Bible that I don't think are justified to accept as truth, namely that there is a God. Me saying that I think that there's something evil does not conflict with my lack of belief in a God, unless you can show that evil only can happen in cases where there's a God.
No, actually, what I'm saying is you're agreeing with me. And my stance is that atheists believe a lot more than not. And they agree with a lot more with Christianity than not. You agree with Christianity.
Do you agree, Fireman, do you agree that New York City is a place? A real place?
Yeah, it's a real place.
Okay, so you believe Spider-Man's real?
No.
Right, so you
there's
can
a contradiction
agree with
in theism right there. Dr. Ben, you just uncovered the contradiction in theism.
So would you agree that you can agree with something in a book, but that doesn't mean the book is true?
No, I don't. I think if you agree with that book, then it must mean that book got some validity. That's what I agree. If you agree that
you prove that Spider-Man is real.
You agree with
Congrats.
that book. You agree with it. You yourself admitted that you agree with a lot of things.
I don't think you know what a contradiction is, Fireman. Yeah. I'm gonna say that. I don't think you understand what a contradiction is. I think that you think that there's some entailments that come from being an atheist that are false. Okay, me not believing in a God doesn't mean that I don't believe people can do things that I would call evil. Those are not in contradiction with each other. Now what?
All right. Okay.
I still want to see where is the contradiction. I want you to show me where I believe A and not A.
Where? Okay. The atheists believe that we come here and we die, turn to dust, right?
That's not an atheist belief. Some atheists believe that. Some don't. Atheism is not believing in a God. That's it.
So some atheists believe in the afterlife. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Like I told you, some atheists still believe in spiritualism.
Wow.
It's not us specifically, but there are some that do.
Right. This is why I never draw conclusions like most people do. And I talk to everybody one-on-one because I never know what your people's exact beliefs are. So I don't jump to conclusions. But this is the very first I can actually say that I heard that an atheist believes in afterlife of some sort.
That's irrelevant. Even if we didn't, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's not a contradiction. Believing in a God or not believing in a God, and believing in the afterlife and not believing in the afterlife, while they are often related to each other, are not necessarily tied. You can have one. There are theists that believe in gods that don't believe in the afterlife, and there are theists that do believe in the afterlife. There are atheists that don't believe in the afterlife, and there are atheists that do believe in the afterlife. One does not determine the other.
Well, for the sake of this argument, we're going to talk about what you believe is an atheist. Is that fine?
We should have started with that, though, instead of you coming in and saying that you knew our position and that our position had contradictions.
I never said say I knew your position. I'm just saying most of the atheists I talk to.
You made assumptions about our position and didn't ask us about them. So
you have to say.
So you're saying some atheists have contradictions in their beliefs. Are you saying, is that what you're modifying your statement to some atheists have contradictory beliefs? Because if that's what you're saying, I agree with you.
I would agree.
I'll tell you what I'm saying. I'm telling you what I'm saying. I'm saying if you are an atheist and you're upholding a lot of the same values as Christianity, I would call that contradiction and hypocrisy. If you still believe in right and wrong,
not at all.
good and bad, well, let me ask you this. If let's say I do something wrong, which you consider wrong, right?
All right.
And I never get caught. What's the consequence?
If you never get caught, then there's probably no consequence.
No consequences.
Yeah. Other than if you have a conscience, then other than the victim of your crime.
Yeah, niggas go right now. People don't got a conscience. They don't give a damn what they do wrong to you. How about that?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
I do.
I feel bad if I do something wrong to somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, so you admit you do wrong stuff to people, right?
Yeah.
Sure. We're human.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So
that doesn't mean I believe in that. Doesn't mean I believe that sin is a thing. That doesn't mean that I believe that there are eternal consequences for doing things.
Let me ask you this: Why not just go out and fulfill your lust and do what you want to do? This is the reason why I brought up nihilism.
Because
I do.
Because
I
there
don't want to
are
do
other
those
people.
things.
There are other people that have harm from that. I act the way that I do because I know that other people exist, and that if I do something harmful to them, then they get hurt from it.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you what, man. I done talked to enough of you atheists to know that every time I talk about doing wrong and right, you always run to what's better for society. I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna say before you say.
Neither of us said that. Neither of us said that, fireman. Neither of us said that. You're lying.
Fireman.
You atheist talking point.
Do you only do
for us to do right?
Fireman? Do you only do good things because your God tells you to?
No, we do good things because there's a reward in the end for being a good person.
Is that the only reason? Is that the only reason you do good things? Is because you get a gold star for it?
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. Do you get up and go to work every day?
Yeah.
All right.
Most days.
You do it for what? What? What's your reward? You get paid, right? So I could say.
Fireman, I did not have to become a doctor for a gold star points. You know what? I'm gonna hang up on you, and then I'm gonna finish answering this question. But I did not go to medical school. I did not torture myself for over a decade. I don't continue to go through the abusive medical education system for a gold fucking star. Physician suicides are through the roof because people enter the field with the hope of healing people, the hope of making society better. And a lot of them can't do that because the system is so broken. And so they end their lives over that. Most people are not going to work for a good star. Most people are getting up and going to work because they are supporting their families, they're supporting their communities, they're reducing harm, reducing suffering. There are people out there who want better things for others. And I think that if your only motivation for doing good things is because you think that some God is going to give you a gold star in the afterlife for it, then I don't think you're that moral of a person.
Definitely. And if you're going to call into a show, and I know the fireman is not on the line right now, but if you're listening, fireman, if you're going to call in to some atheists and tell them that they only do their job because of the money, don't call when a doctor and a teacher are hosting. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, teachers especially are some of the most overworked and underpaid professionals out there, and they continue to do this for their love of teaching and for their desire to make a difference in people's lives. So, like, I want to shout out everyone out there who gets up and goes to work for the betterment of humanity. Like, good for you. Keep doing that. Like, I know we're saying you don't do it for the gold star, but here's a gold star from an atheist. Like, right. Thank you for your contribution to society. Thank you for doing all of that work. Thank you for being part of this community and for doing things for good reasons.
I'm almost offended by that. If I was worried more about what firemen had to say, I would probably be offended. As things stand, I was like, okay, well, that's just an ignorant position to take. And I still want to point out, not one contradiction was mentioned that entire conversation. It was all just smoke and mirrors.
What do y'all say we go ahead and jump into the first call and talk to Sully in Virginia, who has evidence for the Christian God? Sully, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I have deductive evidence that entails the necessity of God's existence. I'd like to present it if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Please present it to us and let this be a conversation. Please don't make me feel like you are just reading to me because I've been read to before. So I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to let you walk us through it. And please be okay with us stopping you and asking questions, maybe not accepting something right away, and respond in turn if you would.
Sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay out the argument. So premise 1, every contingent fact has an explanation. Premise 2, there is a contingent fact that includes all other contingent facts. Conclusion 1, therefore there's an explanation of this fact. Premise 3, this explanation must involve a necessary being. Premise 4, this necessary being is God. Conclusion, therefore God exists. So which premise do you reject?
Well, first of all, can you tell me what a contingent fact is? Is that just any fact?
Yeah, so a contingent fact is just a fact. Yeah, a contingent fact is just a fact that is true in the actual world, but not true in all logically possible worlds.
Okay. So
see this whole argument. I mean, let's just cut to the chase here. This is all presuppositional.
Right. We're coming back to the form of the kalam.
My issue with this argument is that, like you're saying that there has to be like a cause, but again, like, we don't have to know what this thing is, and we don't have to ever know what this thing is. And you're just putting in God, and you're lumping these things all together, but you're still not stringing them in a way that tells us that the answer has to be God, right? So how do you actually make that leap without just throwing that into the equation?
So nothing within the argument was invoking any notion of causality. This is an argument about an explanatory principle, the principle of sufficient reason, and explanations are going to be different from causality. So you're wrong. You're not tracking. The argument, again, is about contingent facts entailing some necessary explanation.
What is the difference between causality and an explanation? Because to me, those sound very similar.
Yeah, so a causal relation is going to be a relation between events, and a explanation is going to be a relation between constitutive elements that constitute the identity of some given thing. So it's not going to be the case that a causal explanation entails some identity explanation or constitutive explanation, which is what I'm appealing to here.
Yeah, I mean, you're still making, as Ben pointed out, that leap to God. You know, especially when you told our call screener, or as I understood it, maybe we've misinterpreted you, but the Christian God, that's still a leap that hasn't been accounted for.
And the fact that you're making an argument right now that you're not leaning into causality. However, you're going to have to, especially if you're, are you bringing in the Christian God? Is that the God that you're trying to bring evidence for?
Yes.
Does this God interact with the physical reality that we are in currently?
The God causes it, but this argument isn't.
So, okay, so hold on. You just said that God causes it. So are you making a causal argument?
No, because this argument is an argument from the principle of sufficient reason.
I really don't care as much about that. You are bringing causality into this now. So what it sounds like is you're trying to use philosophy to get out of having to explain the causality piece of it. And the point is, like, you can go down as many philosophical rabbit holes as you want. I really don't give a shit because I care about the utility of what are we doing with this information, right? If you're going to use this to convince me that there's a Christian God that is going to tell me how to live my life, I really don't care much unless you can demonstrate that that being actually is impacting the reality that I live in.
Yeah, so again, my argument is applying a general explanatory principle to a global state of affairs, which is the entire universe. And the argument I gave is a formal argument. You asked me a question about whether or not God interacts with the physical universe, and I accept that God causes the physical universe to exist, but that's not what this argument is establishing.
Right, but with the argument that you're giving, though, the problem, though, because the problem, though, with this, too, with the explanatory argument, could I just insert anything else into where you've inserted God for that? Like, you're saying that something, you're trying to explain the origin of everything, but I mean, we have Forrest Valkai in here that could tell you it's Roland the Closet Goblin that is in that spot. So again, like, this is just a meaningless argument at that point. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, so again, the argument entails the necessity of God's existence, and the reason why you can't insert anything into that entailment other than God as being a necessary being is because there's an abductive case that I'm making based on theoretical virtue about the nature of God's existence.
What qualities are you giving? Let's define your God that you are using in this spot. If you're saying that only God can fit in this, what are the qualities of this God, and why can't something else have those same qualities?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In virtue of me making an abductive inference in favor of the necessity of God's existence, I need you to demonstrate that you understand what an abductive inference is before I explain this. Do you know what an abductive inference is? Go ahead.
How about you go ahead and tell us?
So just to be clear, you're not capable of demonstrating that you understand this entry-level inference in formal logic.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit cute.
Yeah.
I want to be really clear. Not only have all three of us worked through various forms of the Kalam and these William Lane Craig arguments and some of these ideas multiple times, but there's footage of me like a month ago talking about how exhausted I am of having to explain to people who come in with that salty attitude that I've never heard these arguments before. We've broken them down in so many different ways. If you're calling this show, I have to assume that you know that there are valid counterpoints to all of this, and we are happy to try and walk you through some of them. but I really don't want to get into this space of, well, if you're too foolish to understand the things that I understand, because as Ben pointed out, like the three of us are not specifically invested in these philosophical arguments for God. You know, Sophia and I in particular come from a much more human-centered liberal arts kind of perspective on these things. And that doesn't mean that we don't care or that we're not interested, but you are going to need to talk to us like we're people in order for this conversation to stay fun.
And we have an audience here too who might not have heard these arguments before. And so sometimes when we ask you to, number one, ask you to define the way you're using some of these terms, it's for us to understand how do we meet in the middle? How do we understand that we're not missing the point here? But also for our audience members, maybe someone's watching for the first time and doesn't know this, it's okay to kind of work through this stuff together. So we'd appreciate a bit less condescension, because we can throw that back if you want that, but.
What a fun bitch slapping show that would be then.
That's more of an AXP game, right?
This is way too meta. Let's stick with the substance of the argument.
How about we'll stick with the fact that I have a microphone and I'm hosting this show and I am inviting you as a guest to discuss it with me. If you don't like the rules of the game, you don't need to play. However, if you would like to explain to us the significance of an abductive argument and how it helps us further understand your explanation, please do.
Yeah, so just to be clear, that's another tracking error on your part, because the argument I presented is deductive, and I said I'm making an abductive inference based on the theoretical virtue of the
I really do not care what you're calling it. Just give, let's talk about, like you just said, let's talk about the substance of the argument. Bring us the substance instead of...
You keep pivoting to meta.
How is it so
because
meta
we
to
don't
just...
like the way you're talking to us, Sully, and we have a mute button and you don't. We have other callers on the line and you don't. This is not a high school LD debate. You are not trying to beat us. We are hosting a program and we are inviting you to join that program. So you're going to play by our rules or we'll find somebody else who will. We'd love to hear your argument. We'd love to help walk you through it. Sincerely, we will, but we're not doing this in a Lincoln Douglas style.
Yeah, so just to be clear, do any of you reject premise one of the argument that every contingent fact has an explanation? Yes or no?
Stuff exists, therefore something caused stuff. That's what I got from that, right? Is that accurate?
As far as we know so far, up to this point.
Okay.
No.
Sure. Oh.
What I reject is that you think you have an answer to what that is. Mm-hmm. And our position is that we don't know. It's okay not to know. So my question is, how do you arrive at such confidence that your answer is the thing that explains that?
Yeah, again, because if it is true that every contingent fact has an explanation, and if it is true that there's a contingent fact that includes all other contingent facts, then it would just follow that that fact has an explanation. Now,
but hold on, Sully, though. But hold on. All you're saying is that things have explanations. None of this demonstrates that you know said explanation. Because I can follow you with, yeah, sure, this stuff has as something that could explain it, but you have yet to give me any reason to follow you to your answer.
Yeah, so I'm giving you the entailment here. If there is a contingent fact that includes all other contingent facts, then that contingent fact would have to have an explanation. But the explanation for that contingent fact can't be another contingent fact, since it's the contingent fact that's explained.
So, Sully, you still haven't explained.
So
you still haven't. You're still just saying that stuff has explanations.
What is that explanation? How is it the Christian God?
Because I'm giving you a clear entailment.
Okay, what is your explanation? What do you think? What do you think the explanation is?
It has to be a necessary fact.
No, but what is that? What is the thing that you're getting to at the end of it? What is the explanation? Okay, how do you get to that piece? How do you insert God there?
I just gave you the entailment.
Okay, let's.
So if you're tracking what I'm saying, I'm giving you a straightforward entailment. If you're tracking what I'm saying, I can repeat it for you again, but I've repeated it 3 times.
All right. I sense that you're becoming impatient, and I get that, but I'm a big believer that if you can't explain something to like a 5th grader, then you maybe don't understand it yourself. So I'm going to ask some questions you're probably going to think are overly simple, and that's okay. You know, we have an audience. It's not just us sitting here. Tell me what an entailment is.
Yeah, so an entailment is going to be a conceptual relation between inferences.
Okay, so that would mean that there are 2 things that are related by an explanation. Is that kind of it, or am I not getting that?
No.
Okay, could you explain it to me like a 5th grader?
5th graders generally don't know what inferences are.
You know what an inference is.
5th graders generally don't.
Wait, so just to be clear,
we are asking you to explain it at a
philosophy lecture.
I feel like if you're
Sully,
you don't lecture 5th graders. You're missing the question.
But also, like, this is a huge pet peeve of mine that a lot of philosophy bros think that if you explain things in this overly philosophy jargon type way, that you're therefore inherently more intelligent than other people. But I don't know if you recognize that there are different fields of study and they each have their own jargon. Like if I started talking like the way I talk with other doctors, I think you'd be a little bit confused too. There's a reason I don't talk with people that way. So you have some therapists and a physician here. We need to speak a bit more common language to be on the same page. It does not make you more smart than us. It just means we speak a little bit differently. Please meet with us in the middle, because if you're just going to pull this ego trip, then I don't think there's a lot of reason to talk to you, because it seems like maybe you're just more interested in sounding smart and not actually engaging with the conversation.
Well, and sure, you beat us, you make us look stupid, whatever, that's fine, but remember that there are potentially thousands of people who are going to watch this clip, and I would like for each of them to not have to pause it to look up, okay, so what is an inference in psychology? We're asking you to explain it to 5th graders.
Okay. So the premise that I was appealing to for the first premise is that every contingent fact has an explanation. So all that means is that the principle of sufficient reason is true. And what that is all that's saying is that all contingent facts are facts that do not exist in all possible worlds. So something being contingent means it's true in some possible worlds, but not others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following.
Sure. Still not 5th grade level.
Great. So, excuse me?
Oh, I just said still not 5th grade level, but yeah.
But yeah, we're tracking.
Yeah. So the second premise is just saying that there's going to be a contingent fact that includes all other contingent facts. So there's just a contingent fact about all the contingent facts that there are.
So there is a extra explanation, the explainiest explanation that would explain all of the things, all of the stuff that is.
Well, all of the contingent facts, because premise 1 is establishing that all contingent facts have an explanation. And so if there's a contingent fact that explains all contingent facts, then that fact would have to have an explanation since it's a contingent fact.
Well,
this is a straightforward.
It sounds like we're getting to an infinite regress of explanations.
Yeah, like why is there one explanation?
That's not true.
That must.
Where do we end? Where do we end then? Are you gonna say God?
Well, it's
is
not
that the end of your explanation-ception?
Yeah, because the explanation of all contingent facts can't be another contingent fact that is explaining them. So it has to be a necessary fact, and that is what is God. That is what God is.
The deeper magic from before the dawn of time.
Exactly.
But again, you're just asserting that. You're just asserting that.
No, this is an entailment.
Okay, tell me. All right. So
what qualities? So in this, why is God a necessary fact, and Roland the Closet Goblin is not? What qualities differ between these two entities?
Oh yeah, because the notion of God that is being entailed here is a notion of perfect being theism. So what God is one fundamental property of absolute necessity.
Okay, but if I claim the same thing about Roland,
perfect mean?
If I claim the same thing about Roland the Closet Goblin,
I made up something that explains all facts.
Yeah,
Therefore,
you
all
would-
facts
you would
are explained by
actually-
thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so the problem with that is that I have more of an abductive case in favor of the necessity of this God's existence than the necessity of your being's existence.
See, and again, so here's where I have an issue with getting too deep into the philosophy, because at some point you're going to have to bring in like real world evidence, right? There's some point where you're gonna have to say this one as actually demonstrated in reality beyond like philosophy, right? Like your syllogism is only as good as your facts are sound, right? Like you have to have, like, if you can make a syllogism that says that like grass is carnivorous, and I mean, I don't know, there might be some carnivorous grasses. I don't know. You can make whatever statement you want, but like that doesn't
Until you get to the real world.
And like your syllogism could be logically like making sense.
Well,
but then it still doesn't mean anything in reality because it's still false.
We can define ourselves into being correct and then feel very strongly that we are right because we defined ourselves into being correct.
Right, and that's the leap to God part. Like, this necessary being does not need to be the God of the Christian Bible by any means.
And doesn't even necessarily need to be a being.
Yeah,
We've never
so
seen any reason to believe that's the case.
Well, I gave the entailment. We can get back to that. But just to clarify, if your view is that all true facts are facts that are a part of the physical world, like empirical facts, then that's going to be problematic because
that's not at all what I said, Sully.
Facts about value.
And that's not at all what I said. Because if you came in here with like a deist perspective and you said that I believe there's some being out there, but it's doing nothing and it doesn't matter for your life at all, like, I don't have any reason to care at that point. None of us really have a reason to care at that point. And I probably wouldn't be having this argument because it's meaningless. But the problem is, if you're going to claim a Christian God, that has implications for my everyday life, like I said earlier. And if this does interact with the physical world, then we should see evidence within the physical world that demonstrate that that's the case, right? So are you claiming that this God does have impact on the physical reality? Because if not,
I would
don't care about that.
I would affirm that, but that's not what this argument is establishing. And I don't see
But the problem is your argument. Your argument, Sully. Your argument only goes so far. Like, you are mentally masturbating to the thought of like this defining yourself into correctness. But what does that mean for us? Like, how do if the whole thing is we need to like convert to a religion, why the fuck should I do that?
Yeah, again, because this formal argument is in accordance with
that formal argument is not all that your formal argument did was say that there's some kind of explanation. And even if there's some God that is an explanation, that doesn't mean that I have to change my life, right? Mm-hmm. You have to bring something else.
Yeah, but what it does mean is that you have rational force to accept the argument and accept God's existence, because if you don't, then you're irrational.
I don't though, because you still haven't given reason to say that God is that explanation.
Yeah, your God has no description. If your God is just the thing that is required in order for the argument to make sense, then okay, sure, but it doesn't have any impact on the real world. It's not burning any bushes. It's not sending down any commandments. It's not, stoning gay people. And so I don't really care about it. And I think Ben was pretty explicit on all those points. Under other circumstances, I might continue this conversation a little bit longer, but I want to make sure to grab another phone call while I still have this group of hosts. Sully, I'm going to give you just another minute to see if we can't clear up what is it that maybe isn't getting through on either side.
Yeah. So just to be clear, are any of you the types of atheists that has determined that God does not exist?
No.
No, I'm a 5 on the Dawkins scale if we want to go that direction.
I
think that generally describes most, but not all, of the folks that speak on this show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm content leaving it in the unknown unknowns. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but if you haven't determined that God does not exist, then how could you determine whether or not any fact is related to him? You would have to first determine that God does not exist, and therefore no fact can stand in relation to him.
Right, but I don't, like I just said, I don't care about the quote unquote existence of God if that God isn't doing anything to anybody anywhere. If you tell me that there's a God who created the universe who is just fucking off somewhere in the multiverse, like, awesome, cool. You know, so long as he's not like sending floods to people he hates, I don't care.
Do you think there are any true facts that exist?
I mean, we end up going down.
I don't know how that followed
again.
exactly, but okay.
I'm not giving an entailment. I'm asking you because if you think there are any true facts that exist, there's at least one true fact. Then if you have not determined that God does not exist, how could you determine that that fact or any fact does not stand in relation to God?
Because I haven't made a determination either way. I say I don't know where all of this leads to the ultimate explanation, and I really don't care.
Is there a problem with I don't know here?
Exactly.
With the concept that...
Well, yeah, the problem is if you have not determined that God does not exist and you just say, I don't know, then you have no way of determining whether or not all facts are related to God.
Are you suggesting that you have to have...
that God does not exist?
I have to prove God does not exist in order to prove things are not related to this God I do not believe in.
Yeah, because how else have you determined that any fact does not necessitate God?
I mean, I could say it necessitates fairies, but it doesn't make it true. Like, how do you determine it's not fairies? We were kind of back to this idea of, like, why God? And why are we forced into making a decision?
Because there's nothing fundamental on your worldview.
Okay.
Nothing fundamental on our worldview. Okay.
I am here, and my worldview starts with that. Like, I think you've made a much broader statement here
about ourselves in ways that really aren't accurate. So I do feel like we're circling the same territory. I feel like it's pretty well tread, and I feel like I'm being talked over. So with that, Sully, we are going to say thank you. I know that you maybe will struggle with this, but I would really encourage you to go back and watch this tape and listen to how we say, you know, this doesn't actually mean that. And then you sort of power through us. And perhaps you're right in some sense of that word, but I don't think that you are taking in our very real concerns and our issues with these arguments. Thank you so much for giving it a try and for trying to keep it civil with us, but we're going to go ahead and move on at this point.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Call 512-991-9242 or visit tiny.cc/call TW.